Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN WhatIf 2.0, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was the Last True Hero? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The basement of the building was old and hard to find. Perfect for his needs. He had to hurry though, or the battle raging in the city above would notice his absence. That would unravel everything he had worked on. The plan was simple. Hook up the giant machine no one really understands and hope for the best. Honestly, there were so many things that could go wrong, but he couldn't think like that. The final preparations set, he uploaded the final piece of code he needed into the massive computer system rigged together. Things couldn't have fallen together any better either. His volunteer especially. He was young, willing to do whatever it took to win, had no ties to hold him back, and most importantly, he possessed a quirk. The last installment done, his soldier would wake up around 2 to 3 centuries in the future. Hopefully the war was won by then. If no, well, hopefully his brother won't find out about the secrets until he wakes up. With that thought done, he hurried to the nearby staircase but threw his head back one last time to look at the machine he had stolen from the National Science Development Building. Inside was his volunteer, the window fogged over from the chill radiating from it that the only thing discernible was the shock of vibrant green hair. With one last sigh, he went to face his brother. All for a better future. A peaceful future. Aizawa was exhausted. He was normally in his bed at this hour, but reports of a new vigilante were pushing his working hours. Well, he couldn't really complain because he didn't have to teach like some of the other heroes on patrol right now. The vigilante that he was trying to capture was slippery, he'll give them that. He had appeared at no less than 7 of the vigilante's crime scenes just in time to see a silhouette disappear. It was getting irritating. The worst thing to happen was when the press got wind of some aspects of the vigilante, like the fact that the only reason any of his crimes could be found was because of the hauntingly appealing music he played, and that some of his targets describing that they had a harder time thinking and moving when they heard it. He was given the nickname, the Pied Piper, or simply, the Piper, by the media as a result. And just like his name was derived from the old story, he disappeared just as quickly. Aizawa was really getting irked at how proficient this character was at disappearing from high music. Head snapping at the sound, he strained his hearing until he heard it again. Taking off running as he heard another line of music, and hoping that he'll finally get a good view of his quarry before he disappeared again. Following the music to its source was easier said than done though, as the labyrinthine alleys of the city easily echoed the sound. Finally reaching the source, Aizawa now slid along a nearby water tower to get a better visual, and what he saw shocked him. Down below was nearly 40 men attacking one person, and a further 7 were on the ground clutching their groins. Ignoring the low-level thugs he was facing, he focused on the lone man going against them, begrudgingly admitting that the Pied Piper was an accurate code name for the vigilante as he had a peculiar setup. In his hands was a western flute decked out in silver and gold, and producing a melody as sweet as honey. The vigilante himself was more interesting, if not worrying. He was short. Shorter than most of the students he had expelled this year. His outfit was simple, yet high quality from what he could tell. Black long-sleeved overcoat of sort that had 2 tails at the back and black breeds that were simple, but high quality as well. He had a full-on face mask that covered the entirety of his head in a black helmet that had the image of a flame-ringed grin where his mouth would be. The boots on his feet were black military boots that had a glint of something on the top, probably steel, and were making quick work of the thugs he was fighting. The strangest thing about his costume was all the white marks all over it. Belatedly realizing that they were music notes all over his body. The only reason he even recognized the notes was because his husband had practically dragged him to his instrument lessons, and he had been coerced into trying the instruments and learning the notes. Watching the rest of the fight go down sent a chill down Aizawa's spine. The Piper had practically destroyed the giant gang and he hadn't even done anything beyond dodge and kick, never stopping the music he produced unless he took a breath. Imagine if this person got serious and actually fought with his hands. He'd be a force to be reckoned with. Watching the last gangster go down, he watched as another melody was played that surprisingly made him think of shady trees, a warm sun, and a gentle breeze. His eyes started to droop before he caught himself and looked at the vigilante as he walked further into the dead-end alley. He had his blood set to an immediate boil as simultaneously kicked himself for missing them when he got here. In the far corner of the alley was a small cluster of schoolgirls. The youngest would have to be around 9 while the oldest looked to be 12 or 13. There were 5 of them all together and they were now sleeping against each other peacefully from the last melody the piper had played. He watched in amazement as the vigilante below him magically procured 5 blankets that he wrapped each girl in before carrying them to the mouth of the alley. Once that was done, he immediately turned and started cuffing all the thugs he had taken down. Turns out the music notes doubled as HNDCFFS. Watching as they were further secured by all of them being dragged into a circle where they were all tied together with zip ties that the vigilante produced from his costume. Once he was finished, Aizawa had gathered his capture weapon when the head turned to him. He froze because he had made certain to be nearly silent in his approach and observation. The head tilted to the side before looking at the victims and the gang before looking back up and saying the first words anyone had ever heard him speak. "I think I should leave the rest to the pros." Voice warped by a voice modulator that made it nearly impossible to identify. With that, smoke suddenly filled the alley, and when it cleared, only the gang, victims, and a small wooden flute was left on the ground where the vigilante had been. This vigilante was going to cause so many headaches. The moment Tsukachi got the call that Eraserhead had finally sighted the vigilante that had been running circles around them, he immediately got any spare officers available and ran out of the station to his car. From the location given, it would take them all 10 minutes to get there if they stepped on it. Arriving on scene, he knew they had been unsuccessful as he saw a grumbling Aizawa, a group of schoolgirls, and what appeared to be a gang's worth of tied-up criminals. Telling his men to start grabbing the men that were tied up, he grabbed the coffees he knew he would inevitably need as he made his way over to Eraserhead, having formed a mutual tiredness and somewhat hatred for the vigilante that they had been trying to catch to no avail. Handing the spare coffee to the hero, who simply said a gruff, "Thanks," he asked the question that was at the front of his mind: "Do we finally have an image to put to our elusive friend?" A hint of hope and fear in his voice. Preparing for the usual answer, he was caught off guard with what the erasure hero responded with. "We do." A man of average height with a lean frame. A full-face mask helmet with an image of a feral grin with a hole in the side for his instrument, a flute. His outfit seems simple but sturdy in a gray color with white music notes and black staffs all over it. Simple combat boots with a black steel toe. Overwhelmed by the sudden influx of new information on their mystery helper, he latched onto the detail of the flute and couldn't help making a joke despite the situation. Seems he was aptly named the Pied Piper, watching as the hero before him snorted and chugged the coffee in his hand, giving it back to the detective when he finished. "Just don't let the media find out. They're raving as is for whatever they can get about him. I'm going to head out, see if I can't catch up to or find some clues about him." Though they both knew it was futile, the Piper never unintentionally left any clues wherever he appeared. As the hero before him disappeared into the night, Tsukachi decided to head over to the schoolgirls whose parents had appeared after receiving calls about what was going on. Duly noting the wooden flute recovered as evidence for later. Walking up, he started with introducing himself to the obviously still frightened but relieved girls with a chipper voice to help them relax. "Hello. My name is Detective Tsukachi. I'm the detective in charge of the case for the vigilante that rescued you. I know what you went through was traumatic, but can I get your statements to help in the investigation?" Well, one girl starts. "We were on our way home after a concert for a sleepover. We were just passing by this alley when we were grabbed by those men." She pointed at the knocked-out thugs for emphasis, her friends starting to help with the details. "They has us pushed against the wall and were gloating." Pausing to look at her friends reassuringly, they were gloating about all the fun they were going to have with us, her voice cracking and tears forming in her eyes as she said this detail. Then he showed up. None of us noticed him at first, until he started playing that flute of his. At first it was like we couldn't take our mind off of him, like we'd suffocate if we did. That feeling passed quickly and we all scurried to the farthest corner we could when the fight started. He didn't even stop playing that flute, only using kicks and tripping the thugs into each other when they charged him. The second he finished the fight, he rushed over to us and looked us over. It was unnerving to say the least. Once he seemed satisfied, he rushed back and started tying up all those that were knocked out. He then dropped some sort of wooden flute onto the ground and looked at the roof, saying something about leaving it to the pros, and disappeared into the dark. That's all that we know of our encounter with whoever that was. Sighing as his quirk rang, everything she said is true, he thanked them and said the police would take it from here, and giving all the girls an SERT home, especially for what they went through. Sighing heavily once again, he turned back to the crime scene. Even if he was given hill bavaz of him, Tsukachi had a grudging respect for the vigilante. Taking on a now confirmed 26 gang members alone, while playing a flute and protecting 5 schoolgirls, wasn't something most anyone could do. He was incredibly skilled, and with his new calling card, Tsukachi now had leads to follow up on that could finally start to close the noose around the vigilante's neck. Hopefully it wouldn't be too much longer for results to show, or higher-up heroes would have to show up and join the investigation. Though getting results after so long would be a miracle. At least they finally had an idea of what his quirk was. Though he enjoyed helping people and appreciated the work and effort vigilantes put into saving people, he wishes they would give it a rest. They ended up always doing more harm than good. After making sure all the evidence was collected and the beaten-up gang members were all loaded into transport vans and cars, they all headed back towards the station. All present, missing the gold and silver flute shining in the moonlight as a figure on the rooftops, watched them drive away. Running had always cleared his head. It let his body move to its own rhythm while allowing him to help people. A shame that people didn't like it when he intervened. Then or now. It was the prime reason he even volunteered for Operation Cryobomb, a top-secret operation where he, his leader, and a select few trustworthy of knowing, knew what was going on. A mission to put him in a hibernetic state and let time pass him by for a long time. Hopefully enough where he would be able to help others without sparking a riot. And to escape his past. One he didn't like too, but couldn't help, remember, even as he tried to run away from what he did all those years ago. Many years ago. Growing up had been hell on earth for Izuku, and for good reason. He didn't even know he had a quirk until he grabbed an old flute for the first time. He had been 6 and had been rooting around in the attic while his mom and dad watched their favorite drama downstairs. He didn't even know what came over him when he picked it up. As if all the knowledge of 100 players before him had crashed into his head, and a trance came over, one that had him bring the old, rusted and dusty instrument to his lips to play his first note. Warbled and strangled from the old and misused instrument. He spent the next 10 minutes just looking around for materials to clean the thing, such as an old rag and cleaner he found, and started cleaning it until it could be properly used again, that is, until he was broken out of his trance by a crash, scream, and thud down below. Fearing only for the safety of his family, he immediately went downstairs, not even realizing he still held onto the flute he had picked up. Expecting a burglar or PD thief, the young boy wasn't prepared for the sight that greeted him as he made his way downstairs. There in the hall leading to the stairs was his mom and dad, only. It didn't look quite right. His mom lay on the ground limp and unmoving, a pool of some strange red liquid pooling around her. His father on top, his eyes holding a crazed glint as he repeatedly moved an object up and down into his mother, while muttering demon where, as if it were a lifeline, words of power that would keep him alive. Pausing what he was doing when he noticed his son, a maniacal grin slowly grew on his face. Ah, the demon child graces us with his presence, eh? What's going on? Why isn't mommy moving? The frightened child called out to his father while fear gripped his body in place. Your mother? The were that laid with a demon to bring a freak like you into existence? Killed her myself to make sure of it. A hint of pride in the deranged man's voice as he stared at the trembling form of the freak in front of him. That's right, he thought. This isn't my son, but one of those powered freaks that'll crave power for itself. So lost in thought, he didn't see the boy in front of him raise the flute with what looked like practiced precision, or notice that the trembling want fear. Not fear, but white, blinding rage. He didn't notice what the child in front of him was doing until the first note played. His body immediately went rigid, moving beyond his control as if another force controlled it. Then it hit him, the child. He started screaming at it. "You want to kill me? Go ahead. Show the world the monster you are, something that society will never accept." Then he started laughing. A deranged laugh that didn't stop. Even as the hand holding the knife he used to kill his wife slit his own throat. Weak chuckles escaping his lips even as he died, a victorious glint in his eyes. Dropping the flute, Izuku cried. Cried at the cruelty he had stumbled upon to witness, and what he had to do to live because his father would surely have tried to kill him, and most importantly, he cried because his father was correct. Society would never accept him, not in this lifetime. At best he would become a lab rat, at worst he'll be hunted as a demon by those he once called friends. He couldn't stay. He had to pack up some clothes and provisions and leave. Leave for somewhere safer for him to live without fear for his life. Present. Suddenly pulled out of the darker parts of memory lane by a piercing scream and what sounded suspiciously like a gang laughing at their prey, he immediately went off the side of the building he was on to find in the alley below a group of schoolgirls. All years younger than the reptilian quirked gang surrounding them. The leader, who had some sort of cobra quirk if the fangs and scales flaring around his head were any clue, was laughing and describing in vivid detail what he was going to do to them. Anger rose in Izuku as he watched someone describe doing something so vile to someone so young, even as he pulled out his flute, the first one he had ever picked up, which had been incredibly improved and upgraded from when he first got it, and inserted it into the hole specifically made for it in his mask. Then he started to play. It was his quirk at work right now. He had grown comfortable with knowing it would do this every time he picked up an instrument for a fight. He used a version of the first note he ever played. It filled the heads of those he chose with an image of him in his vigilante getup in the gangster's mind. He had refined it when he was younger to the point where he was able to target the gang and leave the girls out of it. The only downfall of this composition was that after a few seconds of listening to it, it filled the person listening with unbridled rage. Just what he wanted at this moment. As the first few attacked, and were kicked in the groin by a steel-tipped boot for their troubles, the rest cautiously backed off for good reasons. He couldn't stop playing the flute or the haunting melody would lose its effect on the group now surrounding him. Easy enough, he had trained for this exact situation after all. So the massacre began, each man tripped, and getting kicked in the temple, groin, or in one guy's case his tail, so that they wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. None could even hold up against a simple kick before they were unconscious on the alley floor. As soon as the last thug had been kicked to oblivion, he immediately stopped playing and went to the girls who were cowering in a corner. Seeing how scared they were, Izuku was glad that the mask on his head prevented them from seeing anything noteworthy about him as he scanned them for injuries. Seeing that their injuries tallied up to some scrapes and a traumatic experience, Izuku's attention returned to the thugs that he had knocked out. Grabbing the parts of his costume the ancient CFFs disguised as music notes had been genius made to tie them up for the police. As he noticed the man on the roof failing terribly at trying to hide, Izuku decided he wanted to have a bit of fun. Calling up to the hero, he said, "I'll leave this one to the pros," and dropped a calling card of sorts. A wooden flute, made of sturdy oak wood and polished to shine even in the dim alleyway, with the first part of a secret message inscribed into it. He just hoped someone would be smart enough to figure it out. Hearing the telltale sirens of the approaching police, Izuku decided it best to disappear now. Disappearing into the shadows and climbing to the nearest roof and find a hiding spot. Watching to make sure the girls were taken care of, he watched the detective in charge leave shortly after everything was taken care of to head off to get some sleep. It was late anyways, Izuku thought. He should probably turn in at this point too. He still had school to get to in the morning after all. Waking up to the sound of your alarm clock blaring in your ear is never pleasant, especially when you spend half the night racing around the city. That's what Izuku thought as he turned it off to get ready for the trials. If the day, even 200 years in the future, not all that much actually changed. Technology was pretty much at a standstill from when he went to sleep. School was boring as always, and the only thing people really seemed to care about were the heroes in the world. Yes, somehow during nap time, the term hero became an actual profession, and all criminals, no matter the crime, were labeled as villains. A rather stupid classification for a simple thug, and too much power for those with the right quirk for the hero career. 200 years was all it took to get people on the side of quirks apparently. Stepping into his bathroom for a morning shower, Izuku let his mind wander as the hot water pounded his lithe frame. Letting his mind wander, he thought about all that he had found out since he woke up and compared it to when he went to sleep. Quirks were predominant in society now. Only 10% of the population lacked one now, and that number shrank with each generation. Hero would be paraded around for his deeds by doing something as simple as help someone across the street, and fought each other in what amounted to a popularity contest. There were a few outliers in the whole mess of heroes in it for personal reasons. All Might, for one, was charismatic, popular, and powerful, though no one knew what his quirk, and he was always happy to help. No matter what, he helped with a smile on his face. Izuku had his suspicions about the man, but couldn't do anything about them unless he actually met the man. Another outlier was the underground hero Eraserhead, which is a really dumb name that gives his quirk away to some extent, who worked in the shadows, helping the small man by getting rid of simple thugs around the city. Then there was Nedzu, the animal with a quirk. Izuku could go on a whole tangent about him, but had to get out of the shower if he wanted to make it to school on time. Getting out and drying off, Izuku put on his school uniform. Simple black slacks with a white button-up shirt and a black coat to go over that, and some red sneakers he found that he rather enjoyed. Heading out the door to his apartment, he grabbed an apple to snack on while heading to Aldera High School. A small and rather poor high school that churned out working-class citizens rather than any people of actual standing in society. Perfect for laying low with the quirk Izuku registered with. Not willing to risk being ostracized again, Izuku went with different aspects of his quirk, leaving out how he can control people with his music. Midoriya Izu quirk, musician. Allows for the user to talk to people with a melodic voice. The longer he talks with them can put those that listen into a state of hypnosis. Additionally, his vocal cords, throat, heart, blood vessels and lungs are stronger than that of an average human. The namesake of the quirk, however, comes from the fact that no matter what instrument Izuku picks up, he knows how to play it professionally even if he hasn't even seen or played the instrument before. The walk to the school was uneventful, being as Izuku took a back road where there was little traffic at all, and arrived at his classroom after a large majority of the class had arrived. Everyone basically ignored Izuku because he had such a weak quirk, and because he was a frequent target of Bakugo Katsuki. The boy had an endless ego and a powerful and flashy quirk to accompany it. He was endlessly praised and went on about how he would beat All Might one day. A ridiculous pup in a world of wolves. Being 16 and a second year, they were planning on going over future careers in homeroom when the teacher arrived. "All right," he spoke loudly, "you're almost third years now, so it's time you start looking towards the future." Pausing for a dramatic silence, he then boisterously said, "Who cares?" Throwing the papers in his hand into the air, he continued, "You all want to go into the hero course anyway." Which lead the class to holler and show off all their wacky quirks, from being able to pull your eyes from your head, to a girl that had flamethrowers for hands. "Oi teach," the resident hothead began, "don't lump me in with all these weak extras. I'm aiming for UA. I even aced their mock exam." As if that decides what makes you eligible or worthy of the title of hero, Izuku thought bitterly, remembering all the wounds Bakugo had inflicted with his quirk to put others in their place. So lost in thought he didn't notice when the teacher said he was applying to UA as well, broken out of his revelry by the explosion-fueled hand slamming into his desk, charring it slightly in the process. "You," Bakugo growled while his voice had enough venom to drown a snake, "don't even think of applying to UA with such a weak quirk. What are you gonna do, play the villains a lullaby?" At that he laughed at his own joke, eyes never leaving Izuku. "Time for a taste of your own medicine, Bakugo," and the verbal slaughter began. "Oh, look at you, Bakugo," the greenette replied, voice laced with enough sarcasm to choke even Bakugo's ego. "The boy with an explosion quirk? I can see the headlines now." Pausing, Izuku saw the feral grin stretching across Bakugo's face. Hero hopeful kicked out of UA because of violent tendencies. Everyone in the class gasped and paled as the most powerful kid in the entire school was criticized. Your quirk is powerful, and you can control it Bakugo, but you don't even know how to use it. What you see is nothing more than a weapon. Not a tool or a part of you, but a weapon. I wonder how someone with that mindset and disposition will handle the world of heroes where not everything can be solved with a big flashy quirk. Done with his little spiel, Izuku turned to the front of class and got the class moving again, forcing Bakugo to retreat to his seat unless his oh-so-perfect record be tarnished. The day ended up passing uneventfully aside from the morning incident, and as Izuku got up to head home, until Bakugo cornered him in the classroom. "What now, Katsuki?" Izuku asked, exasperation in his voice, intentionally using the boy's first name to egg his ego on. "What makes you think you're better than me, huh? Some nobody with a weak butt quirk that is too afraid to fight back? Yui is a pipe dream for you then, give it up." Wanting to get one last jab in before he and his goons left, he said, "Jump off the roof and hope for a better quirk in your next life." Standing in shock that the explosive teen would actually say that to a fellow classmate, Izuku decided that he should head home now. The path as deserted as always, Izuku relaxed as he made his way through an underpass. Relaxed until his body was wrapped by some green sludge that smelled like it just came out of the sewers. "Thanks kid, you're my hero. I'll just hijack this invisibility suit and then I can get away from him." Thinking quickly as the sludge started to shove its way down his throat, Izuku started to scream. This wasn't an ordinary scream though. It was at such a pitch that the sludge started to vibrate. Slowly at first, but picking up speed as he was having a hard time focusing on keeping himself together and get into his invisibility cloak. As the stalemate continued between the two, a resounding crash came from behind them, causing the sludge villain to start cursing and a strong and extremely loud voice to call out, "Never fear. But because I am here." As a gale force wind knocked the sludge off of him, while simultaneously taking the rest of the oxygen out of his lungs. Falling and passing out, he saw the silhouette of a muscled man that had 2 strands of hair standing at attention on his head. Then the world left Izuku as he passed out. Being knocked unconscious was the thought that rang through Izuku's head as he started to come to. It didn't help that there was someone lightly slapping his cheek. Remembering what had happened before he passed out, Izuku bolted up gasping for breath, only to immediately lose it again as he was greeted by the smiling visage of All Might. "You gave me quite the scare, young man, and I am quite sorry that you got mixed into my chase. But thanks to you I was able to catch this villain." Patting the side of his pocket where a bottle filled with the villain that had attacked him earlier was confined, Izuku was speechless. Right in front of him was the greatest true hero of a generation, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get the answers to the questions he had. Pulled out of thought again by the sight of All Might as he crouched and he spoke, "Sorry to be off so soon, but evil never rests and so neither can I." He jumped, not even noticing the boy that had grabbed his leg until he was higher into the air. "What are you doing, kid? Let go." "If I let go I'll fall to my death," Izuku shouted back to be heard over the wind. "Good point, just give me a second," the hero said as he spotted a roof he could land on. As he landed and the kid right beside him, he prepared to take off again. "Wait!" the kid cried, "there are some important questions I'd like to ask you. As much as I love a fan, I must be off," the number 1 hero said. "Can someone who is berated for having a weak quirk able to become a hero?" The sincerity in the boy's voice making the hero pause long enough to feel the twinge that signaled he was about to transform. As the steam poured off of him in a giant wave and he locked eyes with the teen staring in shock, who just simply said, "So this is what you really look like," as if it was common to see the strongest hero in the world deflate into what amounted to a skeleton, which caused All Might to spit up some blood. "You are taking this remarkably well, my boy," he stated with a sense of both curiosity and caution as he wiped his chin. "It's only reasonable," he said. "No one ever sees you after fights, and it would be inconvenient to be hounded by the press wherever you go. This boy is more than meets the eye," All Might thought as he was returned to the present by the boy asking his question again. "So do you think that a boy wanting to get into UA's hero course who has a weak quirk can make it?" Pausing to actually mull the thought over, he decided to be frank. No, I don't think that if you have a weak quirk that you should go into the hero career. Lifting the now baggy shirt on his frame, he showed the boy the motley group of scars on his left side. I got this in a fight 5 years ago in an undisclosed villain fight. Even using my quirk's full power, I still lost most of my stomach and half my respiratory system in that fight. How can I be a hero, the symbol of peace everyone looks up to, if I buckle under the pressure of evil? What a pathetic hero I would be if that were to happen. His voice somber as he described the extent of his injuries and his situation to the boy in front of him. Of course you can fall, you're still a human that has limits. If only the rest of the world could see it that way though. Shocked with the boy's response, All Might had to get out and clear his head and think properly. Someone who treated him like an actual person and not some god to be looked up to. He would have to do more research on him later. I know it's not what you want, but if you still want to help people you could always become a police officer. They're ridiculed for their work, but it is a respectable profession. With that he turned and started to head down the stairs of the building. Coming onto the street he thought, now to get this guy to the station, while he patted his pocket only to freeze when he didn't feel anything in his pocket. Worry started creeping into him. He had to find that villain before anyone else got hurt, only to see and hear explosions going off from a small distance away. Watching the hero disappear down the stairs, Izuku couldn't say he wasn't disappointed by what he had been told. Heroes risk their lives every day on the job. Why would the guy credited as the #1 hero willingly put someone at risk when he himself had been injured by a villain? Not willing to wallow in self-pity, Izuku decided to go home. Going down the same stairs as the hero before him, he was walking towards his apartment when a crowd gathered at the entrance to an alleyway grabbed his attention. Wanting to see what the commotion was about, he asked one of the taller gentlemen in the back what was going on. Some kid got taken hostage by a villain. The heroes on site can't do much against the villain's quirk, especially with the kid using his. Focusing on the muttering in the crowd, he realized that the villain was the one All Might had rescued him from earlier, immediately sending jolts of guilt through his entire body. Izuku started to push through the crowd to see who had been caught up in his mistake. Getting to the front of the crowd, Izuku paused. Trapped in the villain's body was none other than Bakugo Katsuki. That wasn't what stopped Izuku Tiug, it was the look on his face. A look of fear as his limbs were starting to get more sluggish the longer the fight went on. The heroes Backdraft, MT Lady, Death Arms, and Kamui Woods were there and couldn't do anything. Backdraft was focused on fire and crowd control, MT Lady couldn't even use her quirk in this fight. Kamui was useless use of Bakugo and his explosions, and Death Arms couldn't do anything to the body of the villain as it was made of sludge and couldn't be damaged. Watching as the crowd watched while someone suffered, not doing anything to help sickened Izuku. It was just like the hunts to find those with quirks that happened all those years ago. Not doing anything when you had the power to help would never stop Izuku again, and he rushed into the fight. What are you doing, kid? Get back here. Ignoring the shouts of the heroes behind him, Izuku grabbed a pipe that was turned into a makeshift spear. Something happened that shocked Izuku to his core. The knowledge that only accompanied instruments now flooded into his mind with hundreds of spear techniques. He couldn't stop now though, save now speculate later. Seeing as the body holding Bakugo couldn't be harmed as the villain gloated about that fact, Izuku instead aimed for a universal weak spot. His eye. As the makeshift spear was lodged in the slime, he started to frantically swipe the sludge around Bakugo's mouth away so he could get a breath of air. What the hell are you doing here, Yubi? Were the first words Bakugo screamed at the boy that had just helped him. Like I can just watch someone being killed in front of me and not do anything. Izuku screamed at him. No, he's here to die. Was what the villain holding Bakugo replied with a scream as he had finally recovered from the attack earlier. Raising a tendril of slime into the air, it was brought down with as much force as the villain could muster. Only the hit never landed. Instead it had landed on All Might, who started to speak. Pathetic, I should practice what I preach more often. A hero exists to protect citizens no matter the consequences. With an almighty scream of Detroit slam and a gale of displaced air, the villain was scattered and the fires from the explosions were put out. What had everyone gapping was the clouds that rolled in and started raining. Holy Suri! Someone in the crowd started. He changed the weather with a single punch. Suddenly pulled off to the side by the other heroes on scene to the paramedics, they then started to both scold Izuku for being reckless and jumping into a dangerous situation, while praising Bakugo for his bravery and strong quirk. Not wanting to stay any longer and get home already, Izuku simply asked, "Are you done? I'd like to get home sooner than later." The heroes all just looked at him in shock. This plain-looking boy who was being scolded by 4 heroes was more worried about getting home than the fact that he went and plunged into a deadly situation they were having trouble with. So off-put by his words, they let him get checked for injury before letting him go on his way home. As the route Izuku took led him farther away from the heroes, he let himself think about what happened during the fight. Knowledge like that only appeared when he picked up an instrument. Why would the same thing happen for a makeshift weapon? "I am here!" screamed All Might as he appeared in front of the boy. Scared, the boy just screamed when the hero appeared before asking, "Why are you here? I thought you were surrounded by the press." Laughing at the questions, he simply said, "I got away because I am All Might," turning into the skeleton of earlier halfway through his hero name. Regaining his composure after wiping the blood that came out of his blood in a spray, he started talking to Izuku. "Young man, what you did was incredibly reckless and dangerous. If something had gone wrong, you and that boy could have ended up dead. Furthermore, neither of us would have died. All Might. Even if I didn't have a quirk, I would have found a way to save both of us safely." The hero seemed shocked that a boy still in high school would think he could do that and survive. And then he threw back his head and started laughing. Even in that seemingly hopeless situation, the boy in front of him was thinking of how to save himself and the hostage. Without a doubt in mind, he could do it. "My boy, I think proper introductions are in order. My name is Toshinori Yagi, also known as the pro hero All Might. Well, my name is Midoriya Izuku, and I need to go so I can research a workout routine so I can be ready for UA's entrance exam." Smile stretching even wider after it faltered a bit, All Might pushes on. "Young Midoriya, I would like to apologize to you. What I said on that roof was careless and harsh on my part. It's okay, All Might. You did what you thought was necessary to prevent someone from marching to their death." A rueful smile on Izuku's face as he interrupted the number 1 hero for a second time. "Besides, I don't want one for all. It just doesn't suit my needs or my fighting style." Ignoring how the man in front of him paled at what Izuku already seemed to know. The secret. Less than 10 people on the entire planet knew. "I'm honored you think that I would be perfect, but not every hero needs a explosive power. You're a hammer, I prefer to be a scalpel. Refined and precise. Power that you and your 7 predecessors had would be wasted on me. I won't tell a soul about you or your quirk, but you should consider someone more qualified for that power." Izuku started to continue walking home with his piece said. "Young Midoriya." Turning to look back at the hero, he was given a piece of advice. "I would think of heading to Dagoba Beach if you want to be ready for UA's entrance exam." "Thanks for the advice," was all he said in return as he continued undisturbed the rest of the way home, not even noticing when the hero he left behind called a number once he saw the boy heading away. "Hello, how can I help you, All Might?" said the overly happy voice of Nedzu. "Nedzu, we have a problem that requires your intellect and input for," was all the hero said as he arranged for a meeting with the principal of UA. "Just my luck," Izuku thought with joy as he arrived at the beach All Might gave him. Having worked on it for 2 weeks now, he remembered how the once pristine beach popular when he was a kid was now a junkyard. He could spot everything from used condoms, to old cars long since turned to rust, to old kitchen appliances no longer worth anything. Luckily last night had been slow with only a bank robbery and a hostage situation where he left the next 2 clues to his puzzle as the media named Vigilante, the Pied Piper, and he was able to get a decent night's worth of sleep. He hired a crew to come and take the junk he cleared into what translated as a large dumpster and take it to an actual landfill when he called them. He kept items of interest though. A place like this was a veritable dreamland for the inventions he could make from their parts. He was currently getting a microwave of its wiring when a voice suddenly called out, "Hey! Why are you taking my supplies? with no small amount of indignation. Being interrupted was becoming a theme all too common lately for Izuku's liking, as he turned to spot a girl approaching him. She was shorter than him by about what? 3-4 inches, that had nothing but a black tank top and worker overalls on with the top tied around her waist. She had pink curls atop her head and what looked like crosshairs for eyes, with steampunk-themed goggles on the top of her head. Coming up to him, she demanded, "Well? What do you think you're doing with my supplies?" Izuku was caught off guard by the question but saw the logic to it. The beach was isolated and a constant source of free materials, so of course other inventors who knew their stuff would come here. "Sorry," Izuku said, "I didn't know you were also using this beach for parts." Hearing this perked the girl up from her angry mood right away. Oh my god. Finally another person who likes to create babies. Taking the girl's rather extravagant personality in stride, he decided to start introductions. "Well, it's nice to meet you. My name is Midoriya Izuku." "Handsome May, builder extraordinary," she replied with a grin spreading across her cheeks at her new acquaintance. May had been inventing with her new friend, Izuku, for a month now. He was so interesting. It was actually a surprise that he was cleaning up the beach for strength training as well as keeping all supplies that might be useful to him, and he had a keen eye for such materials. She had been incredibly shocked a month ago when she found that someone else was using and clearing the beach she used to find materials for her babies. People usually reply in shock or with embarrassment at what she calls her inventions. Izuku had taken her talk in stride and had even invited her to his forge, an old warehouse he claimed to own, but she hadn't seen any proof that he did own the building at all. Then she went to the city database and found that he had purchased the building for 50,000 yen. Money like that is hard to come by, so she decided to snoop around with him to find where his secrets lie. She immediately forgot about said secrets the moment she walked into the warehouse and found it full of all the tools she wished she could have but didn't have the room for at home, or that she couldn't afford. He had power hammers and forges of all shapes and sizes, anvils and hammers. Power tools were dedicated to one wall while another had sand belts to polish and shape materials while another held all sorts of materials from steel ingots to American deer antlers. He even had some old tools that required human hands, like a wire saw. That was just the first floor. The second was arguably even more impressive as it was where all the magic happened. It was where all the materials made down below were actually brought together into weapons ABD tools she had only ever seen in those rare pre-Quark comic books. It had everything from state-of-the-art computers to what looked like a station full of finely made chiseled and hammers for detail work. She had immediately challenged him to a build-off, and was shocked that he accepted so easily and set up some parameters. "Okay, but there will be some requirements. 1. It must be a tool that has multiple purposes and can be turned into a weapon. 2. You have to use the materials and tools my forge provides, not your own. 3. We have a full week to work on our tools. You can work as long as you need to, but you can't exceed the 7-day time limit." That was enough to provide a time limit and requirements, but vague enough that she could create whatever she imagined, especially with all the specialty tools that only top hero schools or support companies could provide. Perfect. She had decided to make a staff, but this baby wasn't just for whacking and spinning. 5 days into the competition with 9 hours of sleep total, she was finally getting into the finer details on the inside. It would hold a variety of bombs and compartments, and could be turned into a dangerous weapon by flipping a SW switch that would start to use the kinetic energy battery she had installed into it to release its charge to create a powerful zap. She had made the staff out of 3 steel ingots and had it layered with RBB to keep the circuitry of the battery from blowing up all the grenades and cartridges on the inside. She had also made a set of gloves that would prevent the user from being shocked by the staff and wouldn't slow down movement. Izuku, on the other hand, had spent the majority of his time just making a lot of small gears and thin shapes that would go over them to protect them from whatever he planned to create them for, and on one of the computers with a delicate chip and spiderweb of wires. The most interesting thing she found in his invention was a bunch of thin pieces of metal and a key. The key looked to be made out of gold and had an end so convoluted she had no idea how it could possibly work, and the pieces were made of steel with a bunch of weird shapes on the end of each one. He hadn't even started piting it together by the time May had finished putting hers together to start testing it. She would have to leave it until tomorrow, she decided, looking at the clock and seeing how it was time she had to head home to be ready for school tomorrow. "I'm off, Izuku. I'll be back after school tomorrow." "Okay. I'll see you then." Hearing the smirk in his voice as if he had already won their competition. "Don't think you have this in the bag, mister. I have a warehouse of tools," she called as she walked out of the warehouse. Honestly, how did she ever get lucky enough to meet Izuku while also being able to do the stuff she wanted without having to explain it to him? It was as if she had found someone to resonate with her soul like no one else had ever before. It was a strange feeling, she thought as she started to walk home. She was so tired from the constant forging she didn't even notice the school gang approaching her until she bumped into their leader, a boy named Kaido that had a quirk that allowed him to turn his arm into a WHP that could spout flames if he wanted to. Well, if it isn't the little inventor. "You know, I've noticed you're rather distracted in school lately." "What's it to you, Kaido?" May asked him with wariness. He had been pinning after her since school started and scared off anyone that she tried to befriend, as if she was some great prize that might be stolen from him. "Feisty, I like it. Actually, I was wanting to help you relax with my boys," he said, gesturing to the 4 other guys behind him, all sleazy Dutchbags that had some weak quirk or a mutation quirk that let them be feared. Wanting to just get home, she just replied, "No thanks, I'd rather eat one of my babies than hang out with you. Besides, it's late and I still have to get home." "Now is that any way to treat your boyfriend?" Kaido asked, a smirk on his face. He smirked until he was socked in the jaw by Hatsum, who just continued on her way only to be stopped by a boy that had some sort of strength quirk as she couldn't pull away from his grasp. "You speak so much of making babies, how about I give you one?" Kaido said as he got off the ground and turned towards Hatsum. "Bring her over," he said, gesturing to the nearby alley. "She won't be able to make a run for it after we get her there." Paling at what she knew he was going to do if he got her in that alley, she struggled uselessly against the boy that had a grip that she just couldn't break as she was dragged to the head of the alley. They had even started tearing her shirt off, exposing her pink bra-clad chest. The boys were first set out of their ogling of her body as someone whistling an upbeat tune approached the alley. Slapping a hand over her mouth, Kaido showed the universal message of silence with a finger perpendicular to his mouth only to cry out as his hand got bitten by May. "You beach!" he screamed as he slapped her, forgetting about the stranger approaching the alley. "Is that any way to treat a lady?" questioned a voice May had gotten incredibly acquainted with over the course of the past month, and her build-off. Standing not even 10 feet away stood Izuku with a look that would send shivers down anyone's spine. He looked like an angel to save the day to Hatsum, though. A green-haired, freckled, intelligent, and cute angel. Cute? Blushing at the thought, she did the only thing she could think of to get her mind off those thoughts. She screamed for Izuku to help her, watching as he immediately sprung into action. The 5 boys surrounding Hatsum as she saw Izuku work with what appeared to be practiced ease as he fought the small gang. Kaido has his flaming WHP out and was swinging it wildly in Izuku's direction, trying to keep him at a distance, while a boy with a minor telekinesis quirk that let him control glass and a boy that could spit acid tried to hit him at a distance. The last 2 held onto Hatsum as she watched the fight unfold. Izuku didn't even look fazed as he charged the boys attacking him. Kaito's WHP was easy enough to dodge as whips make terrible weapons, and the other 2 were rather weak as the only glass was a small bottle that couldn't do much damage and the acid spit only caused steam to rise off the ground without actually damaging it. Seeing Kaido knocked out by an uppercut to the chin and the 2 other thugs having their heads knocked together was incredibly satisfying to Hatsum. The thugs attacking Izuku dealt with, he turned to the 2 holding Hatsum and May finally relaxed. Only to stiffen as a knife was pressed to her neck. The other boy that had stayed behind was using her as a hostage. His fingers had turned into a bunch of knives, and he was using them now instead of fighting. "Back down, or girly here gets it," he cried out, a tremor in his voice showing how scared he was after seeing Izuku take down 3 of his gang without breaking a sweat. A look of mortification crossed Izuku's face as he paused to raise his hands. "Let her go, and I'll make sure you aren't as harshly punished," he called out. Hatsum barely dared breath with how close the knife was to her throat. "Like you're in any position to negotiate," the thug holding her in an iron grip said calmly, as if he wasn't even there fully, the smell of alcohol drifting from his breath. Not really noticing much else, she listened to Izuku talk in a melodic voice he sometimes used to get her to stop working and head home for some rest. He was discussing terms of getting Hatsum back unharmed, but she missed most of the fine details. He was rambling on and on when the boy holding her loosened his grip. Taking her chance, Hatsum pulled out of his grip, pushed the knife from her throat and ran behind Izuku in Shaq's legs as he charged forward. The one holding her was knocked out by a slug to the temple, and the one who had knives for fingers get a fully powered knee to his groin. Turning back to Hatsum with a softer look in his eyes, he immediately crashed into her with a hug, apologizing for being late. Pulling away with a blush on his face, he handed over the sweatshirt he had been wearing. Grateful to have something to cover herself with, she put it on while Izuku went around tying the gang up with some rope he found nearby. "Thank you," Hatsum said as she gently hugged him from behind, most of her usual energy gone. "What are friends for?" Izuku simply responded with hugging her back as he called the police. Watching the police cart Kaido often charges both assault, attempted RPE, and public usage of quirks was very satisfying to watch. Especially with how gently the boy Karakura was his name that had been kneed in the box carried himself. One of the detectives that arrived peeled off to get their statements, saying he was a detective Tsukachi. Introducing herself, she started with leaving Izuku's forge to walk home to bumping into Kaido to his and his gang's beatdown, making sure not to leave any details out. Once she finished, the detective turned to Izuku and asked for his name and how he had gotten mixed into this. "I had just finished packing up and locking my forge when I started to head home. I was whistling the beat to an old song I like when I heard yelling and what sounded like a slap. I went to investigate and saw that the source was an alley. I wanted to see what was actually going on, and I came across a scene. There were 5 boys surrounding Hatsum who only had her bra covering her chest while the boys held her down as she fought to get out. I couldn't stand quiet, so I intervened. The first 3 I knocked out were the leader and 2 ranged fighters. They were easy enough to defeat, and I was going towards the ones holding her down when she was threatened. I tried to talk them out of doing something stupid, and was using my quirk to help put them onto a state of complacency. It was easy to knock them out after that, and then I called the police, and you know the rest." "That is quite the story, Mr. Dash." Realizing he wanted his name, he said, "Midoriya Izu," watching as the detective blinked at him owlishly for a few seconds before smiling and saying, "Well, I hope that we don't have to see each other again for a while." Turning back to his squad car to head back to the station, Mei's attention returned to Izuku after he insisted on skirting her home. "So," smirk crawling around her face, "still think whatever invention you come up with is going to be able to defeat by staff?" Indignant squawk coming from his mouth, Izuku simply replied, "As if a puny metal pole will defeat whatever I make, dear misguided Hatsum." Blushing at the words he used while spotting her house, she rushed, thank for taking him out of Marobi, before sprinting to her house, realizing she had a friend she could now depend on. To was exhilarating in a way making her babies just couldn't compare with. She'd have to show him what for when they compared inventions Saturday. Nedzu, the animal with an intelligence quirk, that no one knows what breed he is. He just so happened to be the principal of the most prestigious university to train up and coming heroes. He was intrigued right now. Those that knew the mammal knew to run and hide whenever he became intrigued. The furry principal had his attention on 3 soon-to-be 4 items that resolved around 2 individuals. The first was a plain schoolboy of 16 years that would be applying to and taking UA's entrance exam next year. He was intrigued by the fact that All Might had called him after meeting the kid and offering him his quirk. The boy had interrupted the number 1 hero to tell him no and then list off several facts that only a handful of individuals should know about All Might's quirk. The second was the recent vigilante, the Pied Piper. He was slippery, even Aizawa admitted it, though he said he would deny it, as he had only been spotted in costume 7 times total and had never come close to getting caught. The third and arguably most interesting thing was the puzzle, the Piper left behind at big crime scenes. Stuff that makes the news, like huge gang takedowns, bank robberies, and criminal rings. The simple carving of a flute was appealing in its simplicity, but if you looked hard enough you would see a cipher of sorts on the bottom of the flute. A new letter and its corresponding symbols, while the same message was on the bottom of each flute. So far they had enough to sliver the message down to one of several thousand with all the possible combinations. Not to mention that this could very well be the code to another cipher. Noticing that Aizawa had messaged him that he was coming to the principal's office with some paperwork, some tea was made for them to enjoy. As he barged into the office with a look of exasperation on his face, Aizawa was looking like he would be in a foul mood for the rest of the week. Placing his papers on the principal's desk to look over, he sat down knowing the rodent wanted to talk to him. Glancing at the stack and seeing that they were expulsion papers and that there was one for every student in his class, Nedzu wanted to get the conversation started. "So, what do you think of Midoriya? You have been tailing him for the last month since All Might asked you to." Voice as chipper as ever. The boy has a plain appearance, and what seems like a versatile, albeit weak, quirk that will be destroyed by the entrance exam. Looking at the principal pointedly as he said this. He spends most of his time either at school, his apartment, or at his warehouse. Pausing to see if Nedzu would jump in and seeing that he wouldn't, he continued. He's been cleaning a public beach in whatever spare time he has and is making remarkable progress as he guts the electronics and takes anything of material value, like steel beams, from what amounts to a illegal landfill. He then takes those to his warehouse for God knows what reason, as he has extreme defenses surrounding the place. I tried to sneak in once and a minigun turret appeared and told me to leave or I would be shot, as I was trespassing on private property. All in all, I think he's a boy that is using what he has in the world and found some secrets that circulate the underground that he shouldn't have. That, and he isn't letting his quirk define him. A boy with potential. You almost sound impressed, Aizawa. Would you feel a sort of kinship with Midoriya because you both have non-physical and flashy quirks, and he won't let his define him? Nedzu asked. Get the idea out of your head, Nedzu. The thought is illogical, as I could potentially be his teacher, and I refuse to play favorites. Nodding at what Aizawa said, he continued. What about things with our musical vigilante? Aizawa's face visibly soured and he took the tea that was offered him so he had time to collect his thoughts. The man has his heart in the right place but is going on about it all wrong. With a quirk like his he could easily become one of the top heroes, yet he spends it doing the work of a hero illegally. He has a brutal and efficient fighting style, always checks on victims, and makes it practically impossible to catch or get a sighting of. A huge pain in the butt is all he is. An efficient pain in the butt, was muttered under his breath as he watched Nedzu. Mulling over what Aizawa said as he sipped his tea, he came to two conclusions on the separate situations. You can stop watching Midoriya Izuku. He hasn't done anything that would suggest he was doing anything illegal, and he'll be coming to UA where he will be constantly watched. With the Piper, it would seem we need to find a better method of finding him. We'll look back over everything he's done, and double our efforts to decipher his little code. We will also have to ask Dash. Cut off by his and Aizawa's phone going off, they both looked to see the internet was abuzz about the Pied Piper and a daring bold move he had made. Both glancing at each other before continuing, they saw what was a link to YouTube. Clicking on the link had both heroes pulling out some headphones as they started the video. Immediately popping into view was none other than the infamous Pied Piper, who started talking a few seconds into the video. Hello everyone. By now many of you know who I am. I am the media-dubbed Pied Piper, and I must say, nice choice with the name. His voice distorted by what Nedzu assumes was both his mask and a video modifier. I know that the press has been dying for some coverage of me, so I'll indulge them. Each week I'll introduce a new song to this channel where it will be shared around the internet. What an interesting development, was all that rang through Nedzu's head. This song this week is called Savages, and was written a little over 200 years ago by Marina and the Diamonds. I hope I can do the song justice, as it has been forgotten by both modern society and the internet. The music video now starting to play, it showed the vigilante playing a drum set, guitar, some electrobeat system and singing into a microphone, voice coming out clear and with what was a hint of femininity to her. The song was actually quite catchy and brought up some small issues about society as a whole, all while the visuals were actually quite entertaining as they were performed by the note-clad vigilante. That was it. How had Nezu been so blind as the video was now an afterthought? His music-themed armor, now that he was analyzing it, fit perfectly into the small code he put on the bottom of his flutes. He was entertaining the masses as he also gave away a hint to those chasing him. He had even made his account untraceable back to his original device. He was declaring an unsaid war to find him as well by doing this. Pulled back to the video as the music ended, the piper started talking again. Now I'm sure that some are trying their hardest to trace my location. Let me help you. You can't. That said, I would like to address the heroes chasing me. Just try to keep up. The smirk evident in his voice as he ended the video with having it fade to a black backdrop. Never mind, he actually declared a war to catch him against all the heroes now after him. Looking up to Aizawa, who just had a look of resignation on his face. He's a genius and a fool, the man proclaimed. He gave us so many hints about himself and his message through that one video. Did you notice it? Oh, absolutely. Some of the things he said will have to be revisited upon, but I may have just figured out his code. Every bottom of the flute has a letter with some symbols next to it. Combine those and you get music notes. He is literally giving us an instrument to play, and he just gave us all the notes to decipher it. We must call Detective Takachi and have him bring all the flutes over here so we can play them. Voice becoming more excited now that he had discovered the simple answer to such a difficult problem. Waiting for the detective was torturous for Nezu. He needed to find the secrets those flutes held, and he was vibrating in his office seat like a child on Christmas morning on a sugar high. He had BGMI power loader bring in 2 inventions to make sure nothing was destroyed. The first was a clear synthetic polycarbonate to contain any explosions or fires that might occur. The second was a device he was asked to make quickly. Made of simple materials like plastic and metal moving through small motors all over the thing, it was designed to play the polished flutes Detective Tsukachi was bringing. A few quick raps on the door signaled the arrival of Naomasa. Opening the door himself, Nezu ushered the man in to test his theory. Welcome, detective. Would you like some tea while this goes on? No, thank you. I'd like to see if your hypothesis is correct. We've been chasing our tails the entire time we've been chasing the piper. Handing all 11 of the flutes that had been collected so far to Power Loader so he could set them up. He then retreated to a couch in the room to watch what occurred. Looking at the bottom, Power Loader put the first flute into his 2 devices and checked with Nezu to make sure his music notes were in the correct order, and getting the affirmative, he hit the start button. The music that drifted out of the box was a short, yet appealing solo that almost brought a tear to Nezu's eye. As it finished and waiting with bated breath, a compartment opened up at the bottom. It was the where he had written his notes, the inside of it having had a hollow wall. The cipher working perfectly to cover up where the 2 pieces of wood met. And a series of objects appeared. The same as what was connected to the bottom of each flute and the letters they were connected to. Quickly playing the rest of the flutes brought out a different message board each time. Looking over what they had at the moment, the first one was a easy enough decipher, though what it said shocked Nezu. It read, "Congratulations on solving my first puzzle, Nezu." This vigilante was shaping up to be more interesting the longer Nezu got to be acquainted with the mysterious figure. He could only hope that the next few messages were somewhat more enlightening on who he was dealing with. Though some messages were more cryptic than others that had a clear definition. One read, "You talk to a dead man," and another said, "I am ancient yet at the same time I am young." This vigilante truly was becoming more fun the longer Nezu knew about him. UA University, the school that crushed aspiring heroes' dreams and accepted only the best of the best into its prestigious halls. It was a monument to the power that heroes could achieve if they tried hard enough, and curbed those that thought the game was easy and carefree. Truly prestigious for what Izuku wanted to do. Help people without being hunted down by heroes because of it. Truly great. As he entered the gates of the renowned university, a brash voice said, "Out of my way, extra," forcing Izuku to turn out of the way so he wouldn't be bowled over by Bakugo as he passed. The blonde flares at him for a second as he continued on his way, as if it was Izuku's fault that he was in such a mood. Probably was, but still. Did the boy have no sense of decency? Continuing on his way, Izuku slipped on a slightly raised cobblestone on his way inside. Great, now I can be the laughingstock before I even get inside. Only to stop falling as someone slapped his back. Gravity cancellation? Levitation? Some other strange power? Sorry, I used my quirk on you without permission. It would be bad luck if you tripped on your first day, right? His savior was a cute, bubbly girl who had a bowl-cut hairstyle, rosy cheeks that made her have a permanent blush, and a grin stretching from ear to ear as she looked at him. The sight was incredible, Izuku thought as he stumbled over his thank you. See you inside. She called as she ran off into the building, not wanting to be late. Following suit, Izuku ran in as well, only to find out he was seated next to Bakugo as the seating was organized by school. Luckily, he didn't cause a commotion as he wanted to actually get into the school without any marks to his record. Sitting just as the presentation started was a relief to Izuku as he listened to what the hero present Mike had to say about the tests they would accomplish. The first would be a written, followed shortly after by a physical exam, where they would show off what they could do as heroes in training. As he was explaining the details of the physical exam, he was interrupted by a voice above Izuku. Excuse me, but the flyer we received said we would be battling 4 sets of robots. If this is a mistake on UA's part, it is unacceptable of the top hero school in the country. Also you, boy with the green hair, if you think arriving just before we start counts as on time, I suggest you leave or take this seriously. Voice and actions robot like himself. Ignoring what the boy said as some in the crowd snickered at him being called out. Present Mike didn't lose a beat. I was just getting to that exam number. The 4th robot you will fight will be more of a gimmick to avoid, a arena trap if you will. The best advice for this is to just run away. Now that the explanation was done, Present Mike managed to get a plus ultra from the crowd of students before they went on their ways. Being separated into different groups was a godsend to Izuku. He was away from Bakugo, who would be too absorbed in his little world to notice any other test takers. The written exam was laughably easy to take as it was all about what they learned in school and scenarios that a hero might stumble across. The physical exam was going to be difficult though. Robots didn't actually get affected by many of the aspects of Izuku's quirk. Even if he wanted to, there was only so much he could do. He did have a few new tricks hidden up his sleeve, but those were emergency use only as he didn't have long to test them. Getting off the bus at testing site C was when Izuku caught sight of the girl who helped him this morning. He never even got to thank her now that he thought about it. Starting to make his way over to her, a hand suddenly applied to his shoulder. It was the glasses boy that had interrupted the explanation earlier. Are you trying to distract that girl? She is clearly preparing herself and you could make her lose focus. Did UA put you in here to see how other applicants would respond? Start. Immediately dashing into the city to get away from the situation, Izuku heard the hero screaming, "What are you doing? There are no countdowns in real life. Follow his example and get going." Not looking back to see if the other examiners were following him, he pulled out a pair of rods from a hidden sheath on his back. They were made out of a durable, strong, and lightweight material that would help in a test such as this. They combined to form a bow staff that would destroy any robot it smashed into. Coming across a group of 5 3-pointers, Izuku set to work. He had learned that his quirk didn't specify what sort of instrument he could use, which was why he was able to maneuver around and destroy the robots as he did. He had learned that so long as he classified it as an instrument, he could use it. Things like instruments of war, which is why he had learned all those spear techniques when he saved Bakugo. A truly incredible find on his own quirk that he hadn't known before. Dismantling the last robot, he started running in a direction that looked like it didn't hold many examiners destroying robots. Groups of 1 and 2 pointers were all that could be found in this part of the fake city, but that was okay. He didn't need combat points alone as he pushed another examiner out of the way of some falling debris. This was a CYCO. Fight, destroy, save and repeat. He lost count of how many robots he had destroyed as he had been too busy just saving and destroying the robots he came across. He didn't even know how many minutes he had left as he had turned the rest of the world out. A rumbling in the ground signaled that it was close to the end as the 0-pointers were released. It was a monster was what rang in Izuku's mind as he turned to leave from the path of destruction the behemoth left behind. He paused as he heard a small cry for help over the din of escaping hero hopefuls. Looking back showed the nice girl from earlier trapped under a pile of debris and looking sick like she overused her quirk. The zero-pointer was on a collision course with her. Not even hesitating, Izuku used one of his new techniques to get there quickly. It was a complicated process of gathering all the sound waves around him into a sort of body armor that he then used to travel at the speed of sound towards the robot with an ear-piercing shriek because of the sudden change in sound waves. Looking her over as he arrived, he could tell she had either broken or sprained her ankle, had overused her quirk, and was having trouble lifting the debris off of herself. He couldn't get the debris off in time and get them both to safety before the zero-pointer reached them, so he did the only thing he was good at: recklessly protecting the innocent. As he started to walk towards the zero-pointer, he focused. His throat would kill him and he wouldn't be able to talk for a week, but Izuku decided to use the second technique he had discovered. Inhaling as much as he could while ignoring the girl's screams to save himself, he willed his vocal cords to their strongest and tightest they would go. It would be close, but he finished just as the zero-pointer arrived. As it slammed its hand down towards the ground, Izuku let loose a scream. It rivaled that of present mic at full volume and easily destroyed the arm and main body of the arena trap, causing it to fall harmlessly backwards away from the nice girl and Izuku. Stumbling back to the shocked girl, he easily lifted the debris, which was as light as some of the machines he had cleaned from Dagoba Beach. He carried the girl to Recovery Girl, who was treating the injured. Chuckling at the sight of the boy carrying the girl bridle made the nice girl heat up, while Izuku was oblivious to the fact as he set her down in front of the youthful heroine. A sprained ankle and quirk exhaustion. I suggest you get some rest after this, sweetie. Looking at Izuku, who had some red swelling on his throat, she also gave him a small peck as he sagged in relief. I wouldn't go talking so soon. She cut him off before he could start talking. A vocal box damaged like that to save someone's life. When I was your age, we had something called common sense to hold us back from using such attacks. I suggest you get some rest as well. As she walked away, she smiled. She had a few bets to place on who would end up dating who with the other teachers to place after all. After walking back to the front of the building again, Izuku went back into the building. It was time to take the support department exam as well, just as a precaution. He was greeted by Power Loader that just gave them the rundown. Build something with the materials the school provided and give it to him at the end of the next 3 hours, and to begin. The room had a surprisingly small number of applicants compared to the hero course, only about 300 total. Immediately starting on his device, Izuku quickly lost himself to the motions of creating as he worked on his device. It was an updated model of the first device he made in his build-off with Mei. A girl who now caused him to blush when she got too close to him for his liking. It was made of a solid base now, and was no longer so big and bulky. It was ladybug-like in appearance and was the size of his thumbnail. It was painted a simple black to make it easier to hide on a villain's body, and make it less noticeable. It would work as a tracking device and a SOS if it were to be crushed by a foot. Taking his device to Power Loader while there were still 2 hours remaining, he seemed pleased and surprised at the speed of the applicant as he told him what it was designed to do, and if he was now done with the exam. Letting him leave, Power Loader opened the device to see what it was made of and found a surprise. The only thing powering the whole thing was a simple computer chip. That wasn't surprising. What was the delicate, almost thread-like copper wire nest that kept the whole device running. It was a miracle the boy was able to make something like this at all, let alone in an hour. And to make it fully functional too. He'd give these to Eraserhead to test before he actually decided on a final verdict, but he could tell that the boy would be a star in UA. Meanwhile, in another part of the campus, the rest of the teachers were discussing what to do about the amount of promising students they had this year. Netsu has been watching one in particular the entire time while also noting some others. Midoriya Izuku. A strange puzzle that no one seemed to solve. He had an okay quirk that seemed to hold more to it than what his registry said. Many of the staff had cheered when he destroyed the zero-pointer. He had an average school and received high marks, yet had the money and resources to buy and defend a warehouse of unknown contents. He knew that Ozawa had been watching him after he was told it was fine, but that was okay. Some other promising students were like Bakugo Katsuki, who had demolished every robot sent his way with a powerful explosion from his hands. A powerful quirk, but he needed to have his behavior checked early on or he wouldn't make it as a hero. There were a few others, but these boys held his attention. One loud, powerful, and brash, while the other appeared calm, collected, and housed a few secrets too juicy for Nezu to resist. This was shaping up to be a hopefully great school year. Nezu was watching the kids walk off after performing the hero course test. There were some that were hanging around to take the tests into other departments since they couldn't make the cut for the hero course, but one in particular stood out. Midoriya Izuku. The boy had done outstanding in the written exam, just a few marks shy of a perfect score. The combat was intense too. He didn't hesitate and moved with a fluid grace, like he had trained for this all his life. The staff he brought with him alone was cause for talk. Not many devices like staffs are usually strong enough to even deny the robots they used in the exams. His cut through them like butter and was wielded with both accuracy and precision. He used some sort of power or technique to make it to the girl in the path of the zero-pointer, and another that let him scream almost as loud as present mic. He had then helped the girl and made sure she got to recovery girl. He then had the spine to turn up to the support course exam proctored just 10 minutes after the hero exam. He had gotten a device made in record time that was three things. It was small for portability. It was designed to double as both a tracking device and SOS signal, and most importantly, they had learned it could also work as a microphone picking up and transmitting discussions to a secure network once it was set up. He had even included a user's manual when he made it. It was quite amusing to see Power Loader and Eraserhead fighting over who would get him. Aizawa pointed out that he had applied for the hero course in his application and didn't rely on his quirk during most of the fight, showing he had huge potential, only to be countered by Maijima using the same argument. Izuku had created an advanced piece of machinery the size of his thumbnail that served 3 separate functions, and that he did the entire thing without using his quirk, showing he also had potential as a major support student. As amusing as it was to watch, Nezu still had to make acceptance letters. "Gentlemen, I believe I may have a solution for you." Voice as chipper as always. Grabbing a cup of tea from seemingly nowhere, he decided to get the other teacher's input in this. "He's too cute to let him go to another school," Midnight said with a slight glint to her eyes. "He showed off something similar to me. I'd like to see what else he has up his sleeves," was the excited crawl from Present Mike. "He'll do well in whatever class you put him in. I doubt it would matter that much to him." Simple tone coming from Cementos, and receiving a nod from Ectoplasm. "The kid's got spunk, I'll give him that," was the only thing that came from Vlad King. "Any input, All Might?" Nedzi asked. Looking uncomfortable at being suddenly put on the spot, he looked as if he was at war with himself. Looking to finally decide on what to say, the #1 hero simply said, "You all have more experience in this than me. I know he helped a community by cleaning Dagoba Beach, but I honestly wouldn't know what to do with him. As I thought, Midoriya will be harder than anticipated to actually put in any one course." Who said anything about being unable to have a class belonging to multiple courses though? Clearing his throat got everyone's attention. Even Aizawa and Pyre Loader stopped their little match to look at Nezu. "My solution, since we know he got into the school with his scores, is that he take both classes. He'll participate in both classes making support gear, and getting to experience the hero course to see what they are like. He'll do both classes and it'll be hard, but something tells me he'll excel in this compromise." Knowing he had won when both teachers fighting over him had separated after thinking over his proposition. "We haven't done anything like this before," muttered Aizawa, who looked dissatisfied in some way. "Now that that's settled, let's move on to the other students. Look at this one, Bakugo Katsuki. He had the highest villain score points and broke the previous entrance exam record. His quirk is suited to combat and he seems to enjoy fighting a little too much. I believe he'll benefit the most in your class, Aizawa." Nodding his affirmative, they moved on to each and every applicant until they had all that they would take. A sadly large group had to let off, but UA wasn't #1 in turning out heroes because they let just anyone in. Some who applied for one course ended up in another because they also tried are for those as well. Why did you want Midoriya in your class anyway, Aizawa? I get there is something you're not telling us about him. Nedzu looked at the hero in question as he talked. All the heads looked at the two in question, especially All Might, as he knew both people in question and trusted Nedzu's judgment. Looking around and not seeing a way out, Aizawa rubbed the gold band on his hand as he sighed. He reminds me too much of the Pied Piper. He sees the world as it is. He didn't flatter All Might or ask for an autograph as most anyone is going to do for God's sake. He moved with practiced movements and seemed to disregard his own safety to achieve his objective. He created a device most struggle to even comprehend and seems to know more than he should. It lines up too perfectly to ignore. Thinking on what the man said, Nedzu turned to All Might. Would you mind telling me of your encounter with the boy again? Knowing there was no way to escape, All Might started to recall his meeting with the boy. How he had saved him and grabbed him as he left before his time limit ran out. How he had crushed the boy's dream trying to keep him safe and alive. How he had rushed headfirst into danger to save someone else without a second thought to his safety, and how he had rejected his offer to accept his help before he even made the proposition. The details no one should know about his second form and how he had given the boy a beach to clean if he wanted to. At the end of the story, most were shocked at the boy. He had treated the symbol of peace as a regular person and had even denied help from him. Then he showed up today and did all that work in 2 exams just using his mind and physical capabilities. Truly impressive. Aizawa, what do you know of Midoriya? Just as the man had shimmied into his sleeping bag, he sighed and started talking. He told that he followed the boy for a month before switching to a few nights a month, noting a pattern. He would wake up early, clean the beach, go to his apartment, school, beach again for supplies, and go to a warehouse until it was late, then go home. He had cleaned the beach remarkably fast. AMD had made seemingly a friend as she was spotted around him often. The boy's staff was what he saw him leave the warehouse with that morning, and had seen some things that gave him worry. He never saw any adults around Midoriya, and never saw him leave for supplies or a job during his entire watch of him. He was strange and had some strong defenses around his home and warehouse, making it impossible to see what he did on the inside. A boy that had to be watched carefully. I see. You want him to make sure he isn't who you think he is, while also teaching him the ways of a hero. Truly a good idea, we just have to implement it. It's been a while, but I think I will teach the boy personally and hand him to either Aizawa or Maijima during important parts of your courses. Does that sound okay? Watching as both heroes nodded begrudgingly, everyone else was paling at the thought of Nedzu instructing a class with only 1 student. If he was lucky, he would survive to the end of the first week. With all the discussions done, it was time to make the acceptance letters. This would be fun. 1 week later. Waiting so long for a simple letter was boring Izuku. He had spent that time running around the city, of making music videos in case he got held up for some reason. He had been laying on his bed in the 1-bedroom apartment he rented when he heard the mail slot open and a few thuds as his mail was delivered. Getting up and checking on them showed that they contained the usual junk mail, a few bills, and a letter from UA University. Forgetting everything else, he rushed back to his room with letter in hand to see the news. Opening it revealed a small metallic disc that held a button. Pushing the button brought up an image of a bear? Mouse? Whatever creature it was, Izuku recognized Nedzu from his extensive research when he woke up. Hello Midoriya. What am I, a bear? A mouse? It does not matter, for I am Nedzu, the principal of UA. His squeaky voice proclaimed. I must say, you impressed quite a few of us. You managed to pass the written exam with flying colors. You unfortunately only got 37 villain points in the physical exam. Fortunately, there was a second hidden scoring system in place. Rescue points. For your actions during the exam, you managed to get 60 rescue points. You made the highest score in UA entrance exam history. Not only did you apply for the hero course but the support course as well. You turned in a masterpiece of an invention and caused quite a tiff between 2 of our teachers. We don't want to waste your talents, so we made a compromise. I will personally teach you at UA. You are in Class N and will be mingling with both support and hero coursework over your stay at UA. I hope you can keep up. Welcome to your Hero Academia. With a small flash, the projection ended. Class N Class Netsu. I do hope someone as smart as you can keep me busy while I become a pro hero. UA University. The pinnacle of power for all upcoming heroes in the making, and Izuku was now a student of such a top-tier school. He had to hurry though. Being late on the first day would put him in a bad spot, especially when your teacher also happens to be the principal. Turns out finding his class was easier said than done, as he had to ask an older student for directions. The energetic and muscled blonde paled when he said his destination, but gave him the directions muttering, "The kid's gotta have a curse to be in that class." Ominous tone aside, Izuku made his way to the class without interruption after he got the directions. Looking at the door when he arrived, he couldn't say he wasn't intimidated. It was at least 20 feet tall, had a large one end painted in red, and had some instrument being horribly played inside. Mustering his courage, he berated himself. You can fight hordes of villains and goad heroes with years of experience to hunt you, but you can't enter a classroom. Get a hold of yourself, man. Before he could psyche himself out, he moved the door to the side and entered the class. The inside, if possible, gave him more pause than the outside did. In a class meant to house 20 students, instead held a variety of chairs ranging from beanbags to couches of high quality. The walls were covered in blackboards and had a variety of colors of chalk to choose from. In the far wall was a teacher's desk, furnished with some of the things only a principal could have, like an intercom system, and a half-dozen filing cabinets and shelves full of books about who knows what. Then there was the principal himself. A small creature with white fur, a clean business suit, and a scar running perpendicular to his right eye as he seemed to be struggling to tune a violin. Deciding to get the most obvious problem in the room taken care of, Izuku marched over to Netsu and took the violin out of his grasp. The knowledge that always came when he picked an instrument up flooded into him as he started to tune the instrument. The bridge was too high, which was giving Netsu his trouble. Done with that, Izuku also adjusted the bow as the hair was too tight to play properly. He gave both parts of the instrument back, making sure to correct the mammal's hold to make sure the instrument would make the most incredible sound it was capable of making. Suddenly realizing what he had done, and to who he had done it to, Izuku lit up a bright red and started apologizing profusely as the principal stared at him. Not expecting the small chuckles that turned into a full-on laugh from his teacher, Izuku looked up from his bow. He saw a smile on the principal's face. "You actually did that faster than I thought you would. Well done with lesson 1. Making sure to help someone when you don't have to is the essence of heroism." A bashful smile appearing on his face as he thanked his teacher. "I'm sure you know this already, but I am Netsu and I will be your homeroom teacher. Now we don't have much time to get acquainted, as I have to get to the opening ceremony soon. You will be moving between my class, the hero course, the support course, and your regular studies. Since I'd like to know where your skills lie right now, you'll be taking a quirk apprehension exam with the rest of 1A right now. Here's your gym uniform. It would be best if you hurry though. Aizawa doesn't like students who waste time. Just head to the field and come back here when you're done." Disappearing around the door, Izuku immediately bolted through the school to make it to the changing rooms, which were located on the other side of the school. Once inside, he quickly changed and raced out to the field where there wasn't a single soul to be seen. Making sure he had the right field, he started to do some calisthenics when he saw a figure approach. He had black clothes that looked like they had been slept in, with a pair of yellow goggles and a white scarf-like object around his neck. The bags under his eyes and the greasy hair hanging down to his shoulders didn't do anything to dispel the hobo persona the man seemed to emit. Going up to him, he asked the man, "Are you Aizawa-sensei?" Getting a grunt in response, Izuku continued with his warm-up. Watching the rest of the class walk out, Izuku spotted some familiar faces. There was Bakugo, of course, smug grin turning to a scowl when he saw Izuku. The strict boy from the entrance exam was there as well, arms waving dramatically as he tried to scold Bakugo. As if anything short of expulsion would stop the explosive boy. Lastly, there was the nice girl whose name he never got. Both Glasses and Nice Girl lit up as they saw him, but immediately focused as they saw Aizawa. As the last of the class arrived, Aizawa started scolding them. It took you 15 minutes to get here and get ready. I expect that time to drop to 3 minutes by the end of the first semester. Take the boy next to you as an example. He isn't even in this class, and was here before any of us. Shrinking as he was put on the spotlight and everyone's attention was turned towards him, Aizawa luckily saved him. We will be doing a quirk apprehension test today. Schools don't let you use them in events so that things stay fair, but that system is flawed as you don't know what you are capable of doing. Bakugo, what was the furthest you could throw a softball in high school? 84 meters, was the proud smirk that came out of the boy's lips. Try it again, but use your quirk this time. You can use your quirk however you want, just don't leave the circle. Stepping into the circle with a feral grin in his face, the boy wound his arm back and let out a mighty explosion alongside an equally explosive exclamation of, "Die!" softball arching into the sky, trailing a wisp of smoke behind it. Showing the score to proclaim 706 meters, the other students started to excitedly talk amongst themselves. A pink-skinned girl with yellow horns and black scara eyes seemed a little too excited as she proclaimed, "We get to use our quirks? This is going to be so fun." Izuku felt the chill down to his bones, looking at Aizawa who had his quirk activated. His hair was floating around his head and the pupils of his eyes were now glowing red. Fun, you say? How about this then? The student to come in last place will be deemed hopeless and will be expelled on the spot. Expelled? That's not fair. Nice girl proclaimed, followed by assent of quite a few classmates. Izuku has heard enough at this point. Disasters, villains, and horrible people don't play by the rules. What made you people think for a second that being a hero would be a carefree life when you see all of the disasters and fights they have to intervene with on the news? If you can't handle the reality of the world, then leave. Silence reigned over the small crowd as they processed what the small, timid green-haired boy had just said. I couldn't have said it better myself. Aizawa gruffly said, "Let's get these tests started already." That broke the class out of their revelry and spurred them to action. Talking all centesimed, though it was at a lower volume than before as everyone focused on the tests. Izuku places average in most of the events. He couldn't use his quirk for any of the tests, so he had to rely on his body's capabilities to pass through the exams. Toe touch was easy enough. He was practically bent in half with how far he was stretching. Pull-ups were easy enough as he did around 150 before he had to stop. Endurance had to be stopped as he wasn't going to anytime soon, and he managed to do well on both the 5th and 100-meter dashed. Side to sides, only a small boy with grape-like hair managed to really excel. Crunches were easy enough to do, and the final event was upon them. The ball toss. He couldn't do much else, so he just chucked it as hard as he could, making sure to use his body to throw it as hard as he could. He manages to get a decent score of 107 meters, placing himself in the top quarter of the test results. Looking at the screen displayed, he saw himself firmly in 4th place of the entire group. The only people above him was a boy named Shoto Todoroki, a gorgeous girl named Momo Yayarozu, and the glasses boy whose name was Tenya Ida. That had to grind on Bakugo's nerves that he was outdone by the boy he ridiculed. On cue, the explosive boy launched himself at the boy who placed before him. "How can you possibly place ahead of me without even using your quirk, you freak? You must have cheated somehow, otherwise UA wouldn't have accepted you." Suddenly looking like a mummy and unable to use his explosions, he was brought face to face with Aizawa. "Now listen here, I proctored the exam, and he got in on his own merit. Now I suggest you calm down or I'll send you to the principal for your punishment." With a glare at Izuku when he was freed, he walked back to his spot grudgingly. The grape-haired boy, on the other hand, was sobbing on his knees as he had placed last in the exam. Also, the whole expulsion thing was a ruse to get you to perform your best. Head back to class now, you'll find your syllabus on your desk. Turning, he started to walk off. The rest of Izuku's new acquaintances started speaking amongst one another. Of course he wouldn't expel us on the first day, it was an obvious ruse. Certain in her thought process, Izuku decided to change the rigid thinking of that ponytailed beauty. Oh, he meant that threat. If you look at the public records, you can see he expelled his entire class within the first week last year. If he kept you, it means he sees potential to teach. It's good to be certain, but you can't think so rigidly. You have to account for all possibilities no matter how grim they may seem. Not waiting to see how some of his peers' faces had paled, the whispering that started as he left, or the last place boy breaking down again, he quickly changed and went back to his classroom. It was empty. Quickly scanning the ceiling and walls for anything out of place, Izuku decided to walk into the classroom. Nedzu has said he would be back as soon as the welcoming ceremony had ended. It should have been over during the quirk apprehension test, so where was he? Sticking his head out of the door to see if he was on his way and seeing nothing, Izuku retreated into the classroom. He was being tested right now. Looking around to see if anything had changed, he noticed some marks on a blackboard. Some incredibly thin chalk marks in the bottom right corner started part of some words. Spotting similar lines on the other blackboards, he grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil. The traced words ended up coming out together as purple beanbag. Spotting the only purple beanbag in the entire room, he went over and unzipped it, showing a smiling Nedzu. Another quick solve. You are turning out to be most impressive, Mr. Midoriya. Looking at the principal, only one thing ran through Izuku's head. This is looking to be a long year, isn't it? The start of classes at UA were interesting in their own ways. The quirk apprehension test was the only thing that stood out in the morning. After the hero course test, Izuku had English with present Mike, the man able to keep the lesson about the other language interesting and immersive to the class. Math was effectively taught by ectoplasm, able to help all the students thanks to his clones. Hardly anyone could focus in art as Midnight was constantly roving around. She made it quite hard to focus on painting when she wrapped you in a hug from behind and her body pressed into yours. Cementos somehow made Japanese literature and reading dull, even the exciting stories, and most students struggled to just stay awake. Nedzu taught a private course of quirk studies and history to Izuku since the principal wanted to add a challenge to the boy that caught his interest, especially with the fact he was also a teacher to the boy. Izuku's last class of the day was with Power Loader though. Intimidation seemed to be a theme at UA, Izuku thought as he stared at the reinforced blast door to the support course workshop. A sudden explosion had the door blown wide open as a weight landed on Izuku as he fell to the floor. Through the smoke he heard the incredulous voice of his teacher saying, "It must be some kind of record to make something explode on the first day." Feeling the weight on him shift and call back in her exuberant voice he knew all too well. "Well, get used to them. They'll pave the road to my baby's success." The smoke cleared to confirm Izuku's suspicions. Mei had landed on him with his face getting a bountiful view of her. Bad Izuku. She's your friend, don't think like that. Closing his eyes he called out to both Mei and Power Loader. As important as this conversation is, can I get up now? Izuku! Mei screamed. When did you get here? Not even seeming to realize the situation they were currently located in. Power Loader, thankfully, saved the now tomato red boy. He probably arrived right before your explosion went off. Looking at Mei as she avoided eye contact. Letting the hypergirl run back into the support workshop, the hero turned to Izuku. We're currently building the hero course suits right now. There's one last table for you and whose costumes you'll be making. Anything you make has to be approved by me, so don't get any crazy ideas. Walking into the workshop behind Power Loader, he saw the last workstation with 3 folders on it. The names said Momo Yairzu, Ochako Uraraka, and Kyukajiro. Their designs fit with their own personalities and quirk, though Uraraka had made hers a little too vague, simply saying she wanted something to keep her from getting nauseous. Momo had created a rather risky outfit so that she could use her quirk to her best capabilities. Getting to work on the easiest one was Kyuka's suit. The first part were the shoes. Military combat boots with a reinforced iron sole and designed to create little sound. Perfect for stealth and combat as well as comfortable. The amps on the sides were powerful enough to turn a small rock to dust, and would be her primary weapon. The jacket was extended slightly from her design, and was lined with a specially designed Kevlar and titanium material. Imagine John Wick 2, it would stop any slash or bullet attacks and would keep the wearer alive. Doesn't mean it wouldn't hurt. Her breathes went the same way. Leather with a thinner Kevlar and titanium layer for ease of movement, Though he had hand-stitched silver music sheet music, he had looked up into the jeans to give them appealing design. The last two items, Izuku added to her costume. She hadn't thought of close combat or mid-range, so he added an item for both. Some leather gloves for close with a thin layer of titanium to deliver a solid punch, and a choker with a powerful microamp, designed to stun and concuss enemies without giving your own tricks away. Putting her costume to the side, he started on Momo's costume. Her design was unique, but impractical. She had designed a leotard with a short skirt and high heels. This would require a complete overhaul to make a functional costume. Grabbing a notepad and pencil, he made a quick checklist for materials, and went to gather them. First up was definitely regenerative cloth. It would repie itself after being torn, so she could keep her modesty. More of the Kevlar and titanium to make a majority of her costume. Reinforced visor to make it easier to access schematics and molecular structures. And ankle-high combat shoes. Heading back to his station, he started to work again. The majority would be a red and black patterned sleeveless wetsuit basically. It was covered with a layer of regenerative materials over the fat stores on her body so she could stop worrying about exposed points. Shorts were added instead of a skirt because of their practicality over a skirt, and the boots were reinforced with a titanium sole. He also added the visor for ease of work. She won't be able to remember every structure for everything, especially in a stressful situation. A on-hand computer would be extremely helpful in such a case. The last costume was Urarika's. She wanted it. Wait a second. She just put make something to help keep my nausea under control? That could be taken in any manner of ways, especially because the description was leading towards skin-tight clothes. Going with a hunch, he grabbed a skin-tight suit. He was going to modify it to be slightly looser than what she had her measurements at. It was reinforced with some thin titanium thread with a larger thread making a design of stars, planets, and meteors. Perfect space them to go with her quirk. Her heels would have a small slope for comfort and would have a spring sole. That meant he couldn't reinforce it at all. She would get a twin pair of bracelets that would be reinforced and hollow to hold small iron pellets the size of small marbles. One of the better safety features was a helmet. It was designed to provide a map of where she was, locate weapons, and was capable of taking a 50 caliber armor-piercing round at point blank and come away unharmed. Power Loader had jumped when he had tested it to make sure of its safety. It would also expand to reinforce her neck and shoulders without hindering movement so she wouldn't be hurt. The best touch to the costume was definitely the coat. It was a two-layered coat designed for dual purposes. The outer layer was big and wavy, perfect to get attention or be used as a distraction as it was bright pink. The undercoat was bulletproof and held pockets for any additional tools that Urarika might want to have on her. Finished making and packing the suits away, Izuku looked out the window to see the sun halfway with the ground. "Did I work the rest of the day away?" he questioned out loud. "Yes, and the night too." "Good morning, Midoriya." Not expecting a reply when he asked the question, Izuku whirled around to see Power Loader with a cup of coffee in hand. "You didn't even notice the passing of time when working. And since we couldn't snap you out of it, we just let you work. I must say, the costumes you made are something else. I get you this morning anyways, so why don't you head to your homeroom and get a nap in? You look like you could use it." Indeed, Izuku thought a nap would be fine. Waving goodbye and trudging to his class, he opened the door. Inside was Nedzu, who looked shocked he was there so early. The mouse was in the process of placing pressure-sensitive mines around the furniture in the room. Ignoring the principal and his homeroom teacher, he made sure one of the more comfortable bean bags was clear of mines anywhere before sitting down. He even checked inside the comfortable object before collapsing into it. "Power Loader gave me the morning off," was the only thing he said to Nedzu's inquisitive stare. Setting an alarm on his phone for later, he nodded off, not noticing Nedzu remove all the mines before leaving for his office to do work. Izuku woke up to his alarm going off. Opening his eyes, he found his vision blocked by a yellow sheet of paper. Picking it up, he saw Nedzu had left him a message. "Midoriya, I understand you needed a nap, which successfully interrupted the next trap I was preparing. So I decided that when you went to sleep to create another trap instead. You have to get to the hero course combat lessons soon while I made sure to set up for you. I gathered the materials from my office and set it up. You win with less than 10 of the traps set off. Looking around the room as he finished reading the letter, he saw it was indeed trapped. Only it wasn't a simple trap. There had to be at least 100 separate crossbows around the room waiting to be set off. Some looked like they would trigger other traps, not to mention the miniature catapults, hanging weapons, and shotguns. Come on, Nedzu, can't I rest peacefully? Looking around to assess his options, the only truly clear spot was his beanbag chair. Around him were dozens of rigid lines of string that would cause destruction if a single one was tripped. The door was a death trap, being that it had the most wires around it. The only real option was starting to look like climbing out the window or through the ceiling to get out. The ceiling had too many traps and weapons on it to be safe to escape with. The window was difficult, but not impossible, as he was on the second floor of the building. Deciding on his course of action, Izuku started moving. He started moving towards the door. He wouldn't go out that way, it was too effectively trapped up. Instead, he grabbed the hammer in the catapult close by and turned towards the window. Carefully pacing himself forwards, he suddenly started sprinting, dodging the strings, but not all, which was signaled by 4 thwumps as he hit some strings. Halfway to the window, rearing his arm back, he snagged another line which signaled another crossbow to go off. Throwing it, he triggered another 4, barely dodging one of the bolts sent in his direction. He saw the hammer hit and shatter the window before he was in the air, following the hail of glass shards. Free falling the 30 feet to the ground, he tucked and rolled so as to avoid the damage simply landing would give him. Getting up from the lawn he had landed, he saw some upperclassmen stares alternating from looking at him to the window he came crashing out of. The muscled, plain-looking blonde boy that gave him directions the other day gave a sage nod of understanding from his spot before continuing on with his day. I think I know why he said I probably had a curse. No wonder people don't last long with Nedzu as a teacher. I'll just be the first to succeed. With getting out of his classroom taken care of and doing it with less than 10 traps set off, he started to jog around the building towards an entrance. Seeing one, he went in and made his way towards Class 1A, where his hero suit was being stored. Walking in, he saw the rest of the students had their cases with their costume, some looking at him accusingly as he arrived. Young Midoriya, it is wonderful to see you could join us after all. What kept you, if you don't mind my asking? Came the booming voice of All Might in his Silver Age hero costume. Fragile grins spread across his face. Pausing a second before replying, Nedzu, was all that he said before grabbing his case from the wall and heading towards the changing room, noting how only 2 people in the class had paled at the principal's name. Momo Yaoyorozu and All Might. All Might obviously was both a teacher and a hero who knew what Nedzu was capable of. Momo, she had the studious look to her, so she probably thought Izuku was some sort of delinquent now. Just what I needed, my classmates thinking I'm causing trouble already. Heading out of the class so as not to waste time, he quickly made it to the changing rooms and was opening his case in short order. Inside was a costume he created that would be comfortable, offer a considerable amount of protection, and hinted towards his vigilante career. Looking a lot like Aizawa's costume in the fact that it was baggy, was black, though Izuku added splashed of dark gray, and both had combat boots. Izuku had, however, asked for his costume to be made of Kevlar with a thin mesh of titanium in the middle of it and a small layer of padding. His boots were almost the same, except he had added soles that reduced sound to go with his quirk. He added a black helmet that fit just slightly around his head, giving him a sort of black egg appearance. It was bulletproof, could withstand over 1,000 kilograms of pressure, breathed underwater, and could be used to search for weapons that thugs and actual villains would carry. His prize was his weapon, though. A pair of batons that were made of a metal or he had made himself. It was strong, flexible, and would resonate like a tuning fork whenever it struck something. It had a few suches for some surprises in case he had to get serious. Though the odds of that happening anytime soon were minimal. He had finished putting all his gear on when the others started arriving. How'd you get changed so fast, dude? You left only 3 minutes ahead of us. What's your secret? We can't afford to have Aizawa scold us again. Watching the spiky redhead exclaim the first question, followed by Glasses, who had said the small time difference, and a boy with yellow hair and a black lightning bolt in it screamed the third point. Thinking of a response, Izuku simply smiled innocently and walked out to the tunnel to wait for his classmates, fully aware of the conversations going on in both changing rooms. The boys had easily been loud enough for the girls to hear them on the other side of the wall, as the hall still echoed with their remarks. The wait didn't take very long, and he was soon following his classmates for the lesson to the training field. Getting there, they saw All Might with a ballot box and an object covered in a cloth. They say the clothes make the heroes, ladies and gentlemen, and looking now, I see the future is in good hands. The loud voice easily quieted the small discussions going on as the class waited to see what they would be doing. Today's battle training will be indoors. Looking nervous, the number 1 hero pulled out a stack of note cards before continuing. Most villain fights actually happen indoors more often than not, contrary to what the news reports. The villains of today's fights will be protecting this. With a great flourish, he revealed the object. A faux nuke. It was painted black and had standard radioactive symbols pasted onto it. We will be selecting teams at random, and since we have an odd number, there will be 1 team of 3. The villains will have 10 minutes to prepare, and the heroes of the situation can use the time to plan. Once our teams are established, we can continue. Wouldn't choosing partners at random be detrimental? Glasses asked. Sighing, Izuku responded, "This is a simulation. We don't always get to choose our partners in the field. This is to see how we would react in an actual scenario if this were to happen." "I see. Please forgive my rudeness." Bowing at 90 degrees to All Might and then Izuku. As the regular class got their cards and found their partners, Izuku decided who he would partner with. Walking over to Momo and Kyuka, who had already gotten together and were discussing strategy about either side. "Mind if I join you?" Caught off guard by the question, both girls eyes him up and down before Kyuka started to talk. "Why should we let you join us? You seem to be more suited to being with someone like Todoroki or Mashireo." Pointing at the 2 boys as they were suggested. "I'd rather not with their teammates, besides I'd like to see how the suits I made work in person." Looking back, she saw that both boys had some of the worst kids of the class to pair with. Bakugo with Todoroki, and Mashireo with Mineta. Both girls cringed and allowed him to join them as they started to grill him about their costumes. "Why did you get rid of my design? It was made to be easy for me to use my quirk without hassle or issue." Momo started as they got situated. "Your costume is always function over appearance. Your costume had no armor, expose yourself on a level comparable with Midnight, and was more detrimental than beneficial in a fight. I made a suit designed to allow you to use your quirk without destroying a new costume each time. It is also comfortable and funner to use than a short skirt, leotard, and heels." Facts about the costume and why the previous was so bad rolled off Izuku's tongue as he saw the appealing Momo cringe at every flaw with her design. "You win," a voice both resigned and excited about the information she had received. "What about mine? If anything you added to my design." Outrage clear in the voice of Kyuka as she pointed to the leather gloves she had on and the small choker around her neck. "You needed close range weapons strong enough to defend yourself with. Focusing on just one area to specialize is a terrible idea. Your costume was also improved on in that nothing short of a tank shell will be able to take you down with those on. I made sure of it. Also, how do you like the stitching on the breathes?" Blushing as she looked down at the music notes, she simply smiled and said, "They threw me off at first, but I really like them. Most would just ignore such details like that." Smiling while he blushed himself, he simply replied with a thank you. The group was pulled towards All Might as he called Tage together once all the teams had been established. "Izuku has decided to join Team AMD will be part of the team of 3. Now the first teams will be..." Pausing for dramatic build-up, he exclaimed, "Team A, Bakugo and Todoroki as the heroes, and Team E, Yaoyorozu, Kyuka, and Midoriya as the villains. Your time for preparation will start the moment you step into the building. Good luck. Remember, you have to either subdue and capture the villains or recover the nuke to win or lose." With that, he walked off towards the observation booth to watch what the 2 teams did. "How are we going to beat them? Both of them are powerhouses in their own regard, and we don't exactly have cambag-oriented quirks." Kyuka bemoaned as she handed the faux nuke to Izuku to carry. It's simple really, he replied, starting to smile. Both are certain in victory, and from what I've gathered about both, neither will even attempt to work with the other than to throw some insults and warnings to the other. They'll be easy to pick off one at a time. Now I know why you were with Ned's, Momo muttered under her breath, though Luca managed to pick it up and gave the other girl a quizzical look. Momo mouthed to her as they reached their building. Following the boy inside, they went to the 4th floor before placing the nuke in a room that didn't have any windows and only had a door to enter from. Momo, see if you can't create some copycat nukes. We want to confuse the enemy first. How many should I make? The woman questioned. 3, was all Izuku said in response. After making them and handing them over, Izuku explained his plan. We make 2 dummy bombs on floors 2 and 3. We ignore floor 4 where the nuke is hidden, and protect a copy on the 5th floor. This will cost them both as they can't tell which is real or fake, and will likely waste time to try to think around us. Bakugo will fly in and use his quirk a lot. Leave him to me. I want you two to deal with Todoroki as he's easier for the pair of you to contend with. They don't have time to check each door on each floor, so this is a high-risk, high-reward plan. Are you with me, or do you have an idea that you'd like to share? Both girls were simply staring at him in shock. He had created a good plan that would actually give them a chance to succeed while minimizing losses. Both consenting, they set their plan in motion. They had just set up in the top floor to prepare for the fight when All Might's voice rang on the intercom. Hero team, you may now engage. Followed shortly after by explosions and the crackle of ice echoed through the entire building. The battle had begun. The battle had begun. It was 3-on-2, and the villains were outgunned, in terms of quirks, even though they held the numerical superiority. They didn't have to wait long as the explosions Katsuki was capable of making rang through the building. Followed swiftly by the crackle Todoroki's ice made as it traveled through the building. The explosions didn't stop once, indicating that the plan was working so far. Bakugo was on a manhunt to take down the extras, as he so kindly called them. The moment he appeared in the entrance to the stairwell, Izuku swung his staff as hard as he could. The explosive boy was barely able to duck underneath it in time to avoid getting struck. Instead, it hit the wall and created a gong-like sound, which was the signal. Kyuka was now pounding the air with high-pitch frequencies of her heartbeat from the amps on her legs, effectively destroying the ice approaching the floor and destroying the audio that was being picked up by the cameras. Their earpieces were still functional, but they would have trouble hearing anyone on the other side. Bakugo growled out in the only quiet part of the building. You were hiding what you could do all along, weren't you? It was probably to make yourself feel better than me. Why else would you try to pull a fast one and hide your abilities? The staff Izuku held now beginning to rotate, causing a slight whistling to be heard by Bakugo as it swished through the air. Actually, most of the stuff I've used so far has been recently discovered. Did you know that once my body became stronger, I could control sound waves to extreme extents? Like right now, we are in the only spot not being assaulted by high pitches frequencies. Starting to advance on the explosion user, he started to move faster while saying, it's never a good idea to show what you can really do at the start of a fight after all. Swinging his staff at Bakugo at full strength. Down below, Shoto was having trouble. He kept a cool face as he continued, but it was getting harder. The first bomb he had found was on the 2nd floor. Thinking Bakugo had chased them off, he touched it, expecting the match to end. It didn't. Confused, he puzzled it out. Momo. How could he forget? She had probably made decoys in every floor and was with the real one right now. Letting a torrent of ice escape him, he quickly worked to cover the entire building, but was halted when a deep resounding gong-like crash preceded the ear-splitting racket of something that destroyed and cracked most of the ice he had made. This fight wasn't going to be as easy as he had though. Observation deck. Can they do that? A shocked Mina exclaimed as she saw the duplicate nukes being made. They are using resources at hand to slow down the enemy. It is quite common actually. All Might said to the class. Though I don't know why you would leave the real alone and defend a fake. The man thought to himself. Looking at the monitors, he saw that Bakugo was making quick process through the floors, completely ignoring the duplicates while he searched for the villain team. Todoroki was taking a calmer pace when he found the nuke on the 2nd floor. He touched it, and when nothing happened, he appeared to have puzzled it out, and sent a huge wave of ice to cover the whole building. This was quickly thwarted as a gong-like peak sounded from Midoriya's staff, which seemed to trigger the plan as Kyuka and Momo had sound-canceling headphones on, and a high-pitched sound escaped the powerful amps on Kyuka's legs. The ice nearly shattered and the volume destroyed the audio as All Might flustered to turn the sudden volume down. Sounding as flustered as he looked, he said, "Well, I think the villain team had a plan we couldn't see until now." The other students seemed reassured with the feats they had discussed while heading to the booths regarding the teams. The class seemed split on who would win based off of quirk or number. Rarely was it that those two factors decided the battle. This fight would be a good lesson for them. Battle Zone. Izuku presses the attack, his staff spinning as he danced with a lethal grace few could match. The airwaves he was using were keeping the staff at a constant hum, which made it dangerous to be struck by it. It would literally turn your bones to dust without the one being struck realizing it. The bubble was also moving as Bakugo used his quirk, and they moved throughout the floor. His fighting style aggressive and powered by his explosions. Truly terrifying if they were to actually hit. All that was happening right now was that Izuku would petty dodge and occasionally attack. He was playing with him. There was no other reason why Bakugo would have such a hard time even hitting the boy. Snarling at another failed attempt to hit the other boy, he started to list some facts of his quirk as he prepared an attack. One he couldn't do otherwise. "As you know, my hands sweat nitroglycerin which I can detonate to create explosions." Grinning viciously, he continued, "I can only make explosions but they made these the way I asked for." Grinning, he brought the grenade-themed gauntlet forward, locking onto Izuku who was a ways down the dead-end hallway. Seeming to realize what was happening, the black-clad boy started to furiously rummage within his belt. He seemed to pull out a block of some substance and merely got in a ready stance. "Young Bakugo, if you use that, you'll kill Midoriya," All Might exclaimed over the earpiece. "He won't die if he dodges." Katsuki screamed as he pulled the pin to the grenade. The giant explosion roared forth, blocking his vision as Izuku threw his block forward. "Is he actually trying to kill me?" Izuku thought as the explosion settled down. He was glad he had added a block of his own anti-fire powder to his costume. It had exploded in contact with the fire, and had simultaneously suffocated and drawn the flames and heat in. It was a perfect counter to most flame-based villain quirks. Seeing the look on Bakugo's face as he stood there in shock, like he didn't expect Izuku to stay where he was. "You've been so kind as to show me one of your new toys, let me show you one of mine." Voice suddenly darker to intimidate as he turned the top and bottoms of his staff in opposite directions. The holes that appeared ran through the entire staff and would create a whistle when swung correctly. Then he started to dance. It wasn't a normal choreographed dance to impress, but one to get the notes just right. The tune didn't even require him to use his quirk, and would naturally destroy the human body's sense of balance, direction, and movement. The effects to see in Bakugo almost immediately as he struggled to maintain his pose. "What the hell are you?" He couldn't even finish his sentence as he collapsed to the floor unconscious. The music didn't affect Midoriya, which was why he could use it, and the bubble he made ensured that his teammates wouldn't be affected. Tying Bakugo up, All Might announced, "Bakugo Katsuki has been captured, and can no longer participate in the trial." His job done, he headed towards the rest of his group as he would continue to the next part of the plan. He started sprinting the second the vibrations he had felt from Kyuka using her quirk in the floor stopped. Arriving at the room, he saw Kyuka on the ground, somewhat banged up. Her clothes were torn in a few places, and she looked like she would have a nasty bruise around her jaw as the area was starting to swell. Looking further in, he saw Momo in front of her duplicate with a flamethrower and Todoroki approaching while continuously sending out waves of ice. "Momo, retreat!" The boy screamed as he flung a vibrating staff slightly ahead of Todoroki. Pausing as the staff easily embedded into his ice, and to access the new threat and the words he had said. Momo used that time to get around the ice, grab Kyuka and fireman carry her, leaving the flamethrower behind as she retreated. Looking at Izuku, he simply said, "Surrender, you lost your weapon and can't defeat me without it." Looking at Todoroki, he got mad. Izuku rarely got mad. Mumbling as he stepped forward, he got asked, "What did you say?" by Todoroki. "I said, don't underestimate me." Voice suddenly amplified enough to blow out the wall and deafen Todoroki. A veil of ice crystal and debris clouding the air. The only reason Todoroki wasn't flying right now was because he had created a support made of ice to keep him in the room. Talking in a slightly croaky voice through the dust, Izuku said, "I can't really control them right now, but I have more than one trick up my sleeve. The moment you underestimate your opponent is the moment you lose." He then started to dance. Somehow during the explosion of noise and ice, he had retrieved his staff full of holes. Starting to see the room sway, Todoroki croaked put himself, "What are you?" Barely able to be heard as he blacked out himself. Tying him up, All Might announced over the system, "Villain team wins. Everyone get checked out by Recovery Girl, then head towards the observation deck." Meeting his teammates at the bottom of the stairs, Izuku found he only had a sore throat to deal with, and some bruising from when he fought against Bakugo's explosions. Kyuka did have a bruised jaw, but was quickly healed by a kiss from Recovery Girl. Momo was just tired from using so many lipids at one point of time with the flamethrower. Bakugo and Todoroki were unconscious and resting in the nurse's office. As the trio entered the observation deck, they saw almost everyone was white as a sheet. "You defeated the most powerful students in the entire class," a shocked Kirishima said. "And you hardly even touched them," Azui said to add on. Soon the entire class was calling out compliments, and All Might struggled a little to be heard. Yes, they did very impressive. They had a well-thought-out strategy, and made use of what they had to achieve victory. This is a prime example of the ancient saying, brain over brawn. Now can anyone say who was the most valuable member of the team? I believe that would go to Momo. Flabbergasted that Izuku, she started to rebuttal what he said but couldn't after what he said next. "Momo, you allowed us to win because you could create those extra nukes, and managed to keep Todoroki occupied long enough for me to get to you. You even managed to grab Kyuka as you retreated, improving our chances if this were an actual villain fight. You were the most important person. Without you, we wouldn't have one." Odd that he would say that about her. Momo blushed as she thanked him, class clapping and supporting Izuku's decision to label her as the MVP of their battle. The other battles continued, none quite as destructive as the Izuku participated in, but quite entertaining. Some stood out for how they used their quirks and skills, while some were overly reliant on their quirks. When all was said and done, they learned a lot from the battles. They were now out of costume and on their way to the cafeteria to eat lunch when they were interrupted. "Young Midoriya, would you like to eat lunch with me?" asked the number one hero. All Might was offering to eat lunch with him. The hero he had shared sensitive knowledge about the quirk he possessed that only a select few other than the hero even knew about. "Are you guys okay with this?" He looked at the few people he had gotten acquainted with on the way to lunch. A chorus of "sure" and go-aheads gave him his choice as he turned and motioned for All Might to lead the way. Fillowing the Goliath of muscle and power, Izuku was led to the teacher's lounge. The lounge was rather spacious. It had 4 fridges and a fully functional kitchen in the corner for teachers who brought or made their own meals at the school. Comfortable looking couches and chairs were dotted around as well as a few tables. There weren't any teachers around surprisingly, and the room was uncomfortably quiet. Coughing to get the conversation flowing, the hero led him to 2 couches with a table in between them to eat on. The table was a nice dark mahogany and had a glass top, and the couches were soft yet firm, patterned with vines all over them. Perfect for sitting and eating lunch. Not wasting a moment, Izuku said, "You can deflate, that injury probably limits the time you can fight, and spending it on lunch is a terrible idea." Laughing good-naturedly, All Might shrank to his civilian form saying, "Right, you are young Midoriya." Opening his bento, Izuku followed suit as they enjoyed their meals. Finishing a good portion of his off and with plenty of time left during lunch, Izuku spoke to All Might. "I know you didn't just ask me here to eat lunch, what do you want?" Spouting blood from his mouth like a fountain, All Might tried to calm down as he coughed his lung out. "My boy, whatever made you think that?" The number one hero was good at many things. Trying to shift or deflect conversations was not one of them. You has the underground hero Eraserhead tail me for months and are having a private conversation with me. This all screams distrust. You don't want your secret out, and I'm not going to spill the beans on you. Have a good day. As he said that, he picked up his bento and was making his way towards the door when he heard a warbled, "Wait." Turning to look at the hero, All Might spoke. You obviously don't have any ill intentions, but you shouldn't even know about my quirk, less about those before me. How do you? He said the last question in a steely voice and looked like he would transform to keep him there. Time to see if I can't bullshit my way out of this. My quirk. That's it. Years of training, and that's all I can come up with. Would you mind explaining? Curses. Thinking as he spoke, Izuku made a story that seemed believable while saying, my quit claim lets me know everything about something I consider an instrument. That includes weapons. Where do you think all that knowledge comes from? I can't just magically pick up a flute and know every note and technique to play it from nowhere. Looking at the hero to make sure he was listening, he continued with something all too well remembered. Mostly it's just the knowledge itself, but on a few rare occasions I see images. Fleeting and quickly forgotten. Sometimes it's worse and I get an actual memory. The worst I've ever seen was a little boy. No older than 6 or 7, and he used a kitchen knife to kill his dad. He was one of the first few to get a quirk. His dad had killed his mom, and the boy used his quirk to kill his dad. He would have been killed otherwise. You sometimes see things you can't forget. All Might, like when you grab a replica gun and see someone shoving blood into another's mouth and telling them to keep the fight going before opening fire. Some things you want to just forget, but you just can't. Izuku was in hysterics and had slid down the wall sobbing. The hero in front of him looked stunned. Then Aizawa entered the lounge. Seeing a boy crying on the ground and a shocked All Might, he went over to the hero and spoke quickly. What's going on? Voice leaving no room for comment. All Might talked. He said how he had asked the boy how he knew about him, and just received the most shocking story he had ever heard. After giving Aizawa every detail he could recall, the man told the hero to get Recovery Girl, Nedzu, and Hound Dog immediately and tell them to come here. He would get the kid to calm down while the number 1 rushed through the school. All Might stopped at Nedzu's office first, knocking before entering as quickly as he could, giving the most general rundown of what was going on with Midoriya and giving the mammal his student's location before he rushed out. Recovery Girl was none too pleased as the sudden door opening caused all her paperwork to scatter across the floor. She forgot it immediately as she heard the simplest rundown of Midoriya, help, teacher's lounge, before she scampered out as All Might ran to the counselor. Hound Dog wasn't needed very often as most students resolved their problems with their classmates most of the time. So he was surprised to hear there was a student in need of his help. He wasted no time getting up and making his way after All Might, only knowing the student was in the teacher's lounge. All Might arrived shortly after telling Hound Dog that a student required his assistance. Recovery Girl and Nedzu were already in the lounge calming Izuku down. Nedzu was off to the side talking to Aizawa while Recovery Girl was taking him through breathing exercises. The boy had stopped crying, though his eyes were red from the tears. He looked vulnerable, as if he never stopped to let himself think about what horrors he had seen through his quirk. Hound Dog was the last teacher to arrive and was almost out of breath as he took in the scene before him. 2 teachers, the principal, and Recovery Girl helping a small green-haired child that looked like his world had shattered. He did the first thing he could think of and went to Nedzu to get a rundown of what was going on. It seems that while talking with the boy, All Might asked a question that seemed to bring forth a simple, yet darker side of Midoriya's quirk. It seems that on extremely rare occasions he actually sees the memories the knowledge of the instruments he picks up comes from. The few he said were extremely surprising and unexpected. His squeaky voice calmly stated, I don't see the memories, I experience them. Everyone in the room turned to Izuku as he spoke. The emotions and thoughts running through their heads. The exhaustion of their body. In those few memories, I saw a part of history that the world has tried to cover up and forget. It's hard to keep faith with the government or idolize heroes when you see the world through the eyes of the victim. Some things just aren't meant to be remembered, and I've seen them through the eyes of forgotten. The heroes were deathly quiet as they heard what the boy had said. The heroes were shocked that a boy had had to live with that knowledge, and had acted as if nothing was wrong for potentially years at a time. Hound Dog spoke first as he was more used to getting students to speak about their emotions. How many memories have you experienced and how young were you when it first happened? Izuku was doing great. The heroes bought most of his lies at face value, but speaking about his mom had broke the barriers he had constructed in his mind. He still remembered everything in perfect detail and had sobbed as memories surrounded him. Now he had to lie in how many memories he had experienced and how young when they first started and keep to the story he made. I've experienced 54 memories. The first was when I was 6. That really sent the adults spinning. They had started to mutter amongst each other as they processed the new information. Finally Nedzu spoke up, voice serious and eyes holding a glint. Midoriya, no Izuku, you should have told someone about this earlier. They could have helped you. About to continue, Izuku started speaking first. I couldn't. No one wants to be around me because of an effect of my quirk. And no one wants to help someone with a weak quirk. Society might have changed, but those seemed inferior or powerless are trampled and forgotten. That's what. Bullies got away with tormenting me, and I would be punished for defending myself. The world is broken, and I plan to change it one way or another. Blushing as he realized he cut both his principal and homeroom teacher off, he motioned for him to continue. Nedzu now looked like he was thinking deeply despite it being impossible to tell what he was thinking. Finally seeming to reach a decision, he started speaking. I understand your sentiment, Izuku. I was a literal lab rat before I became a teacher and a hero. I fought my own way and he fed up here, a place where I can shape the next generation. But I had hard times. You will now be required to take mandatory sessions each week with Hound Dog to talk about all of this. You can start now if you want. I'll fill the other teachers in on the situation, so don't worry about classes right now. With that, the teachers that had assembled left for their own offices and classes to do their jobs. Relaxing as most everyone left, and they seemed to buy the fragile web of lies he had spun on the fly. I know you weren't saying everything, Hound Dog said. It's natural to want to hold some secrets back, but if you want to move forward you have to tell the whole truth. Sighing in both defeat and relief and not being found out so quickly, Izuku spun another line in his web. True, not all those memories are bad. There are some that made me feel alive in ways I just couldn't describe. The world has great berry in it, we just tend to forget the ugly for that pristine view we covet so much. Nodding in understanding again, the dog-themed counselor worked with the boy on a session plan. Hound Dog would also attempt to get to know what the boy was hiding. The kid got the attention of Nedzu for crying out loud. Maybe he would be the one to figure out what Aizawa couldn't. After all, listening can be just as effective an information-gathering tool as having informants. Walking away and towards his classroom, Izuku was glad that he was still able to ace his way out of a tough situation with some simple words. There was power in acting and what you said, and he had capitalized on it. He was still heartbroken at the thought of his mother dead on the ground and what had followed. He just hoped no one noticed his slip-up. Nedzu sat in his office recalling the conversation he had had with Izuku earlier. The way he spoke about some of them was odd, but acceptable given memories were a tricky business. Then something occurred to him. The story he had told about the boy and his family. He had given details that seemed too convenient to just be able to know. Like how did he know the kid was one of the first to have a quirk, or that he had discovered it in such a situation? Not unheard of, but completely doable. There were some preparations to be made. He might have a lead on the mysterious vigilante and his connection to the boy he's teaching. How deep or close, he has no idea, but he will find out the secrets the boy held. Izuku walked sagged on his way to the cafeteria. He had made a schedule with Hound Dog, and that would actually be beneficial with getting rid of the weights on his chest without revealing himself. That wasn't why he was sagging though. That morning in class, he had been told by Nedzu that since he was the only kid in class, he was the only one eligible to be the class representative. Now he was going to be watched and tested even harder now. Why can't life ever be easy? I have to hide my past, career as a vigilante, and not get caught in the process. I blame you, first holder of One for All. Walking beside him was Momo, Kyuka, Uraraka, Tenya, and Tsu. He had been surprised that any of them wanted to join him at all for lunch, but they had insisted and had coerced him into joining the group. Many were currently in a debate with Ida over his costume and the pros and cons that were shown. It's streamlined but made of a heavy metal that slows you down. You're fast and strong, surely a lighter armor set would be a better fit for you, reasoned Momo, who had been elected class representative that morning with Ida as the vice rep, as she gave him a slight frown. True, but if I switch to a lighter material then I won't be as protected as when I would have a heavier set. Arms waving about robotically as he gave his reasons for the heavier set. They had reached their table with their food at this point and Izuku was tired of the endless debate back and forth. You're trying to be too much like your brother Ida. The entire conversation stopped as everyone turned to look at Izuku, who was calmly eating his lunch. Sputtering a little before he could form any words, Ida then proceeded to ask Izuku questions. What do you mean I'm trying to be my brother too much? Sounding offended by the mere thought of copying his brother. You wear such similar armor, you idolize him, believe the world is filled with nothing but people with good intentions and those who do evil. Everyone was quiet as Izuku spoke. The world isn't as black and white as you think, and if you try to copy someone else without seeing what you're good at, you'll fail. All of you have and use quirks in every aspect of your fighting. How well do you actually know your quirks though? Can you fight if you can't use them because of the situation? Can you save someone and yourself while fighting criminals? We are here to learn, and I suggest changing who you are into who you will be is the first step. How do you want others to see you? Do you want to inspire hope into who you save? Fear into criminals? This will be the biggest challenge you face. Spiel over with, he calmly went back to eating his bowl of katsudon before noticing how quiet it was. Looking around showed most of the tables around him had heard his little rant and were all staring at him. Most had a look of confusion on their face while others had shock or were irritated at what was going on. Making a shoe motion, everyone soon went back to what they were doing before they had been stopped. The group's conversation also revived and ideas were being thrown around. They were talking about different designs or materials for their costumes and seemed to be making progress finally. That calm was stopped by Tiu as she looked at Izuku and asked, "What do you think, Midoriya? You helped make Momo's and Kyuka's suits, right? Can you help with some ideas here?" At the mention of the fact that Midoriya had made the two suits, both girls mentioned started blushing furiously alongside Izuku as he was brought back to the conversation. "You made those?" Ida cried out, shocked that another person their age had created such impressive suits, though they were different from their original designs. "Well, the designs had to be changed, but I just made them easier and safer to use." Uraraka's too. At that, everyone turned to a blushing Uraraka as they grilled her about her outfit. As she scrambled to recover and answer the questions, Izuku was approached by two boys that had a glint in their eyes. One was the electric quirk user who had yellow hair with a black lightning bolt on the side. The other was short and had small purple ball on his head. The boys stage whispered but were easy to hear as they tried to talk to Izuku. "You created their suits? That means you know their measurements. Care to share that with some contours of the female body?" The table went quiet as the four women and the green head looked at the two with murder as Ida tried to create some order out of the situation. Before anything could be done, alarm blared over the intercom stating in a loud voice, "This is a level 3 alert. This is not a drill. Please evacuate in an orderly procedure." Immediately chaos erupted before anything could be comprehended by the small group as kids flooded the exits. The rest of the students got swept away from Izuku as he stayed seated with something about intruders or something. Placing his empty bowl down, Izuku started walking towards the direction of his classroom and the teacher's office. As he passed the door to the teacher's office, he heard shuffling. It was minute, even as he had been training his senses. Slinking towards the door, he noticed a man that appeared to be made of a purple mist shuffling through the desk belonging to All Might. Seeming to find what he wanted, he left through some sort of portal made of most as well. Looking over to see what the strange man had been looking through, he saw an open file that was messily put together on the desk. Opening it showed the number 1 hero's schedule over the next few days. He'd talked to Nedzu when he saw the principal again. Lost in thought of what was going on, he continued walking towards his classroom, not even noticing the yellow caterpillar form of Aizawa as he rolled towards the office. Seeing the kid leave, he made his way in to see what the kid had been looking at. Seeing the open file on All Might's desk, he saw the schedule on the top detailing times and locations. Worrying things if they ever became common knowledge. He'd have to bring this to Nedzu. 2 hours later. Sitting on the bus, Izuku was slightly overwhelmed and surprised at what was going on. The majority of the class's female population was swarming him, asking on all the things he could potentially do for their suits. Most of the boys were in their own groups talking or glaring at him in envy. There were a few outliers like Todoroki or Bakugo who sat all by themselves. Well, Bakugo tried. The only female not swarming Izuku was Mina, and she along with a few others were right beside Bakugo trying to be friendly. Not even noticing the time pass as he talked to the girls about potential upgrades or overhauls to their costumes until the loud voice of Aizawa called their attention to the front of the bus. "We're here, get off." Voice harsh and blunt as ever. As everyone got off, he held onto Izuku before he could get off. "Not you, I want to talk with you." The rest of the class scrambled off as they didn't want to be anywhere near the teacher when this went down. "I won't lie. You've had me suspicious of you for months now. The way you talk, act, and think reminds me too much of a certain vigilante. It's uncanny, really. Time for some fun." "Aizawa-sensei, I don't think I have to think hard on who you're thinking about. But we're completely different. He controls his opponents with music and fights without missing a beat, while I can control rudimentary techniques involving sound. He leaves puzzles, I solve them. You also followed me for months at a time with nothing to show for it. You need more than just a hunch if you want to capture anyone. I don't think it's necessary, but laws haven't changed much in over 200 years. As the old saying goes, innocent until proven guilty." At this he gave a sidelong glance at his teacher as he walked off, as of daring him to look at the breadcrumbs he had spread and see if they were picked up. He calmly joined the group of kids outside as Aizawa came off the bus with an impeccable poker face on. He was soon followed by Power Loader and some of his older students as Nedzu saw fit to send them as well. Walking towards the giant dome of a building in front of them, the group made a quick climb towards the top where they walked into the building. Inside was breathtaking. Around them were at least a dozen separate zones set in various stages of disasters. A distorted voice suddenly cut through the odd silence, starting with the zones. Fire, flood, landslide, conflagration. We have every disaster that could potentially happen here. I call it the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short. Now before we begin, let me introduce myself. A person of unidentifiable gender was walking towards them in a spacesuit-themed hero while Uraraka was going on about them, their quirk, and how it had been used to save countless lives. This caused the hero to launch into the dangers of their quirks before actually starting any rescue training. While the hero talked, the hairs on Izuku's neck stood on end. Walking towards the edge of the group, he called both Power Loader and Aizawa over to him to point out what he was looking at. In the center of the large central plaza were 3 massive swirling vortexes where dozens of people were pouring out from. "Has the simulation started already?" Kirishima asked, noticing the large group below them. "No. Those are actual villains." Voice turning urgent, H turned to the other teachers present after putting his goggles on. "Since All Might isn't here, I'll take them on while you escort the kids back to campus. Get going." Some of the students cried out to their teacher while he prepared to fight the enemy gathered. Ida made a particularly good argument about the enemy and his teacher's fighting style and quirk, only to be told, "No hero is a one-shot pony." Before he launched into combat, he caught something thrown towards him. Looking up, he saw Izuku lower his arm before seeing the stun gun in his hands. "Be careful," Izuku said, "that has enough power to charge a small city for a year." Before turning to follow the class. Following the class, they had almost made it to the doors when Purple Mist Man arrived. He was actually very snazzily dressed in a waiter's suit and spoke politely given their situations. "Hello, my name is Kurojiri and we are the League of Villains. We were told All Might was going to be here today, but it seems our information was wrong. Nevertheless, my job was to scatter you." Before he could say more, both Katsuki and Kirishima attacked him. He chuckled, mentioning something about them being the golden eggs of a generation before a purple mist enveloped the group and Izuku felt the sense of falling. When he could once again see, he was immediately plunged into the waters of the flood zone. Izuku was drowning. Well, not actually drowning. Instead, he was being dragged down to the bottom of the man-made lake of the flood zone by his costume. Thankfully, he had added a filter in his helmet that let him breathe underwater. Having taken note of his situation, he brought his staff in front of him to look at the various hidden switches and buttons on it. He saw the one he wanted and pressed it. And like magic, parts of his staff opened and the bottom slid into the staff as it started to propel him through the depths of the lake up to the surface. His ascent to the surface was delayed by a shadow shooting towards him and taking the form of a shark mutation quirk barreling right for him with jaws wide to show its many razor-sharp teeth. The massive gullet was knocked aside by Azui, who landed feet first into the side of their head, where she then grabbed him with her tongue and shot towards the surface. Reaching the surface, she didn't waste any time climbing up the side of the boat inside the lake and giving Izuku the opportunity to use a function of his staff to split it and use the two halves to climb the boat. The deck already had someone there. It was the grape-headed pervert who was struggling to get up while complaining about being slammed down into safety. Ignoring him, Izuku turned to Azui and asked, "Are we the only ones here, Azui?" She pet her head to the side slightly with her tongue slipping out and responded in her simple and neutral voice. "Yes, it's just the three of us. Also, call Maitsu." Looking overboard greeted Izuku with guide sight. Nearly 24 goons with aquatic gear or a quirk that let them perform in water. The strangest thing was that they weren't trying to attack or advance on the ship in any form. They were just treading there in the water. Looking into the ship only showed a block of magnesium the size of a twin bed for his efforts. Dragging it to the deck of the ship, he had an idea start to form. Just as he dropped the magnesium, a giant wave smashed into the side of the ship and cleaves it to let water inside. It would take a while to sink, but they no longer had the ability to buy time. Getting Asu and Mineta, he had begrudgingly learned his name. He told them what he had figured out. He detailed that each person below had some form of aquatic quirk and weren't attacking because they didn't know their quirks. Secondly, he asked Siu how far she could jump carrying Mineta. "I could easily get to the shallows, but I won't leave you behind. You're a classmate and I stick to my word." Looking at her pointedly, he said he was going to cause a distraction and that he wouldn't be able to do it with them. Hating himself for it, he ordered Mineta to stock himself to Tsuyu, which he did with a little to much enthusiasm, and the way he stuck himself made it nearly impossible for Tsuyu to take Izuku with her. Going over to the giant block of magnesium, he told them to jump once they heard the splash before he heaved the block up and jumped into the infested waters below. Hearing the splash, Tsuyu didn't waste any time jumping towards the shallows with her classmate attached to her. She had made it a good ways away when she felt the steam rising from the water, and looked back in time to see the massive explosion burst from the water. Aizawa was fighting what amounted to a horde of villains. Most of them were weak with no training or generally weak quirks that he could deal with easily. His eyes were starting to burn from how he had to use his quirks so much in such a short amount of time. Luckily, the villains weren't smart enough to constantly come after him, which gave him ample opportunity to rest his quirks so he could continue the fight. He was in one of said tests when 4 arms made of stone reached around his torso and bound his upper arms to his body while the villain the arms belonged to gloated. "Your quirk can't get rid of a mutation quirk like me. Just try escaping." Thinking of what he could do and coming up short, his hands flailed to grab onto anything that could give him an edge, getting the villain off of himself. He froze slightly when his hand brushed against the handle of a tool he didn't have made for him. Grasping the stun gun he had been thrown before the fight began, he jammed the prods into the stomach of Rocky and turned it on. It seems he found a CHK because he wasn't convulsing with shock or screaming in agony like the villain holding him before the arms around him went slack, and he managed to tumble out of the way of the 4-armed oaf before he fell to the floor. The villains surrounding him edged back slightly, seeing the steaming body of one of their strongest low-level thugs on the floor. Aizawa was going to have to thank the kid ladder for the stun gun. His attention was drawn to one of the 3 main villains who was scratching his neck and saying something about numbers. The hands covering his body made him even more unsettling as he rushed towards the pro hero that was destroyed his horde of thugs. Turning his quirk on, Aizawa went to intercept him as he put the stun gun on a clip on his belt. Aiming to elbow the man's head in, he was shocked enough to blink when his elbow was caught before it could make contact. The second he blinked caused an excruciating pain to erupt at his elbow. The villain's quirk seemed to cause his skin to age and flake off, turn to dust. The muscles and veins below were exposed before he got the man off of him. His usual way of fighting was rendered useless now that he was working with one arm. Thankfully, he now had a backup as he pulled the stun gun off the clip and defied it as he dove into the villains trying to go up the stairs. They fell with little more than anguished screams and steaming when they fell unconscious. There were only a few scattered groups now, and they were slowly retreating back to the main villain. Aizawa was weighing his options of charging in when the warp villain appeared. He started speaking in a surprisingly civil tone to the one covered in hands. "Shigaraki, I managed to scatter most of the students throughout the various zones. However, one student with some form of speed quirk escaped outside. More heroes will be showing up soon." Report over with, he turned to Aizawa, who had relief in his system. Backup was on the way. Settling into a ready stance, he was about to charge with the stun gun when the villain, Shigaraki, turned to glare at him. "You know, Eraserhead, do you think All Might will show up if we killed some students now? We'll at least shatter the image of heroes before we leave." He then turned to the hulking villain that hadn't moved the entire time. It was purple in appearance and was heavily muscled with its brain exposed, a beaked mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth, and wearing only a pair of tattered cargo breaths on its heavy frame. Shigaraki then uttered one word to the villain. "Noma." That one word was an apparent game-changer, as the next thing Aizawa knew, he was face down with his right elbow being crushed as a massive explosion sounded from the direction of the flood zone. The explosion provided him enough opportunity to activate his quirk on the villain holding him, and with his damaged, but not destroyed, left arm to jam the stun gun into him and activate it. The villain didn't seem to anticipate this, as it suddenly started convulsing and weakening its grip on Aizawa, who, surprisingly, didn't feel the electric shock. It must have been Noma's quirk, as the hand's villain started gloating about how it had been made to kill All Might as soon as the small convulsions stopped. Then all Aizawa saw was concrete as his head was repeatedly bashed into the cement below him. He was struggling to stay awake at this point when he heard the main villain running and looked up to see him reaching out for one of his students. He wouldn't allow that to happen, as he instantly activated his quirk and stopped him from disintegrating one of his students. Shigaraki then said something about being cool, and his head was slammed even harder into the ground. He couldn't bear any more, and his body made him pass out. Izuku hates the water now. It was official. He was stuck trudging towards the surface because his costume dragged him down to the bottom no matter how hard he pushed upwards. It was the thing's only saving grace at the moment, because he would have been burned or concussed when the sodium he had jumped in with exploded. Luckily, all the villains had been knocked out by the blast and he hadn't had to do any cleanup, but it also SCD as the blast damaged his staff's propulsion system. Thinking up his best strategy for when he surfaced, he prepared by unleashing the blade inside the staff. It was wicked, with a double-sided edge and gold and silver detail work done along the spine. It was nearly 20 inches long and tapered to a fine edge and point. An appealing weapon designed to kill. He didn't have to wait long to reach the surface, and he saw quite a sight. Tsuyu was quickly dragging the limp body of Aizawa and a now one-armed Mineta, whose now bloody led to the man who was covered in hands. He saw the man planning to rush for the small group to finish them off, but was sadly foiled by a now ringing blade slashing down in front of him. "Now where do you think you're going? You seem a little busy to me at the moment." Izuku was taunting him. The best way to make someone charge you is to do something extremely offensive or rude. Luckily, it was extra effective against the apparent man-child, who started throwing a temper tantrum because a side boss had appeared. Izuku was so focused on his classmates and teacher that he nearly got clobbered by the giant bird-beaked muscle of the villains. He was giant and had muscles bulging all over him and moved with near all-might level power and speed. It didn't even seem phased that a nearly 20-inch blade was sticking out its spine. Withdrawing the blade quickly and stepping back, he saw the wound seal up almost immediately, and Hanzi started to gloat. Apparently, the Nomu was created to kill All Might, and had all the necessary quirks to do so. That made Izuku's actions much easier to go through with, as he knew he'd regret it later. He had discovered it while cleaning the beach and had only tested it during the entrance exam, but his muscles and bones now felt different and he moved. Except everything was slower to him and his muscles were already tearing from moving at the speed of sound. He didn't hesitate when he cut the head of the Nomu off before it could move or when he crushed the brain underfoot many times. Making sure the thing wouldn't be getting up anytime again, he turned to Hanzi as he deactivated that exhausting technique. The man was losing his temper as his babysitter tried to talk him into leaving. Incentive to leave was extra strong when the doors to the building G were destroyed and All Might strode in saying his famous catchphrase. Whining about being defeated so early, the two retreated into a purple portal. Before the portal fully closed, he fired the blade from its hidden projectile system into and through the portal before it closed. It seems the plan for him was a go, but he'd have to wait as a wave of dizziness and exhaustion overwhelmed him. His body also cried out at the torn muscle that he couldn't take it. He fell forward. He didn't hit the ground though. Warm arms enveloped him and he saw the #1 hero in the world through half-lidded eyes. He gave a weak smile before the world faded to black. Shigaraki was said. He had the perfect plan for this boss raid. Go in with an assembled party and weaken the main fighters while scattering the minions of the heroes. Then unleash his secret weapon, his ace, his A-bomb, on All Might. And his plan was ruined by some hidden boss. He apparently was a DPS character with how quickly he defeated the Nomu. But the salt in his wounds was when they had been forced to retreat as All Might had appeared and that he had launched his blade after them when they escaped. Surprisingly, he made Kurogyri mad because it had embedded itself in his precious bar. The only damage anyone had ever dealt to it. Shigaraki was about to destroy it when a voice from the old TV said, "Stop. I would like to inspect that blade personally." Looking at the TV showed an old box TV that was nothing but static and the words, "Sound only," in the top right corner. Giving a stiff nod, he wanted to ask, but knew this was important if his MR wanted to see it in person. "Kurogyri, open a portal please." His voice coming out as commanding, calm, and persuasive as ever. Shigaraki was about to object when the black mist formed a large portal, but his complaint died when his emissary walked out of it. He was dressed in finely made dress clothes made of quality cotton. He had a golden wristwatch on his left hand and an old ring on his right hand, all the while he had a large life support machine around his head. His features would have been fine if not for the stretch of scared flesh reaching from his hairline to his mouth, distorting any image he could have made. Putting his hand on the blade and taking it out of the bar made Kurogyri wince at the damage done, but his MST just stared at the blade. He turned it over and tilted it in a variety of ways before he held the point away and looked along the edge like he would a rifle. "It seems," he finally spoke after processing what he had seen, "do we have an old friend to greet? I haven't seen him in over 2 centuries. It should be quite the meeting," his voice wistful with thoughts of the past. Handing the blade to Shigaraki, who made sure to not put all 5 fingers on the blade, looked along it like his emissary did while the ancient villain returned to his recovery. The pattern looked like a random set of gold and silver at first, but when looked at this way they aligned to make a flute. A flute of gold and silver. There was only one person said to carry around a flute like that. "Kurogyri, it seems we need to start hunting a vigilante." Looking at the blade again, he finally brought his finger down and watched as the blade soon turned to rust and further to dust before it fell to the ground and scattered. Izuku was outside of the USJ after the rest of his classmates had been gathered and the criminals taken to prison. They would be called villains, but Izuku hated using that term for every person that broke the law. Villains had to have a goal that they wanted to reach. These were all just petty thugs coerced into a fight because someone stronger came around and told them what to do. He had lost one of the blades he had forged for his staff, but that was okay. The monster he had destroyed was all the proof he needed to necessitate the loss of the blade. He had seen the size, how it moved around brainlessly, and was so powerful even when Aizawa stopped its quirk. He was alive. Hopefully he still remembered the hallmark Izuku had used in the day. It would be hard to not remember though, he had helped Izuku create it. Getting the all clear from the medic who informed him of his injuries that were just some torn muscles and negligible microfractures, he moved to where most of his class was discussing what had happened. He had barely opened his mouth before he was slapped. Shaking his head to clear out the shock, he looked down to see Tsuyu, who immediately hugged him. "Don't ever do something so reckless again," she ordered. Then she backed off as everyone looked at Izuku, who was giving her and everyone a sheepish smile and nodded, saying he wouldn't do anything like that again. He was surprised when Yaoyorozu, Uraraka, and Kyuka bowed to him. They thanked him because they would have been hurt a lot worse if he hadn't changed their costume designs. "Seriously, you saved our bacon," Uraraka said while rubbing the back of her head. "That and Yaoyorozu made enough weapons to get us to safety," Kyuka said, drawing everyone's attention to the now blushing girl. Thinking back on it, all Izuku knew about her quirk was that she could create stuff. Now was a perfect opportunity to find out. "I was wondering, how does your quirk work exactly, Yaoyorozu?" Now blushing harder, but with an air of excitement, she explained how she could create anything non-organic from her fat stores as long as she knew its chemical makeup. Izuku was now looking at her like a hungry wolf would a fat rabbit. "Does this include incredibly expensive, incredibly powerful stuff like, say, I don't know, graphene?" Oblivious to the green eat's predatory looks, she said yes. She was shocked when she was enveloped into a warm hug. "You're my new best friend," Izuku said, as if this thing happened to him every day. Meanwhile, his classmates were looking at him in shock, or rage in Bakugo's case. Now blushing as badly as one of the characters from her romance novels, she gladly accepted being friends with Izuku. Then she noticed the gleam in his eyes. "I'd like to commission your help," Izuku bluntly stated. That threw everyone for a loop as they tried to understand what he was getting at. "What do you mean?" Yaoyorozu asked. Looking at her as if she were crazy, he explained. "I am a student of both the hero and support course. I just found someone who can create anything as long as she knows its chemical makeup. Why wouldn't I use this opportunity to create a partnership?" Izuku had entered the realm of economics and hero politics. Yaoyorozu was in familiar territory. Now why would I enter a partnership if I'm not getting anything in return? I'd hate to think I was doing this for free. Izuku was quick to offer his terms. "I'll offer a down payment and a monthly pay for you and your quirk services. I'll pay for a meal of your choice after each session too." Yaoyorozu thought over the offer before she made a few changes. "I chose the amount paid for the down payment. You can decide on the monthly fee, but it can't be less than 100,000 yen, and I'll hold you to the meals." Grinning, she stuck her hand out on her expensive offer. Everyone was shocked when Izuku shook her hand. Grinning like a Cheshire cat, he said words that actually chilled the blood in Yaoyorozu's veins. "I'll let you know when we start. I'll draw up a contract first though." That done with, he started to head to the bus so he could inform his homeroom teacher of what he just did when he heard a voice call out behind him. "You can call me Momo, Izuku." Glancing back, Izuku saw Momo with her own grin on her face and a few of the guys and girls blush as he smiled and waved. Making it to Nedzu, who was talking to the deflated form of All Might and a detective, he saw their conversation cut short as Izuku approached Nedzu. "I'd like your help on something, Nedzu-sensei. I just entered into a partnership with Miss Yaoyorozu, and I'd like your help on drawing up a contract." Now looking around, he noticed how the detective looked slightly uncomfortable and All Might looked ill. "Did I interrupt anything just now?" He knew he did, but he wanted to be sure. "Nothing you should concern yourself with. I was actually going to take the student's statements soon anyway." Looking at him, Izuku recognized the detective. It was Detective Neo Mesa. The guy had been hunting him as a vigilante and was still trying to catch him through his now more limited appearances and his extremely popular music videos. So many musical gems lost to time, it was time for some fun. This wouldn't have anything to do with the big villain whose head I left to the floor, now would it? He asked innocently enough. He now had the three men's attention. The guy with hands all over him was gloating about how it had a lot of quirks when I got out of the flood zone. That, and he was about to kill some of the others. I attacked the hand guy and his T called it a Nomu, was there before my blade even connected. I pulled it out of it and it instantly healed. I didn't even see a drop of blood. He ordered it to do something and it moved like a puppet. I pulled a few trump cards and killed it quickly and tried to harm them before they could escape. I launched my blade before the portal closed, but I doubt I caused any serious harm. Looking up, he saw all three huddled and talking in hushed tones. The perfect opportunity to use one of his quirk's aspects. Focusing, he made sure the noise of their conversation reached his ears. What should we do? Young Midoriya knows too much as is. Should we bring him into the know? All Might asked. This caused the detective to glare at him. Are you crazy? You'll be putting both the boy and his family at risk. Do you want that on your head? Well, the man was dedicated to protecting people. Netsu then spoke up with some of his own thoughts. Midoriya is an excellent student, and he's good at keeping confidential matters confidential. I think he could be trusted, but his family is at risk. Deciding that he could play a few cards, he started speaking. I can hear you, you know? All three instantly went ramrod straight and looked at him like he had grown a second head. Don't worry about my family, they've hardly ever even been in Japan for a week total in the last 7 years. Now looking at them, he decided to play to the detective's strength. It's not that I don't trust you and your peers to take care of me. It's just that I'd be hard-pressed to be taken out. It's not like there's someone that can take quirks from people after all. At that he forced a very compelling short laugh, but noticed how the others forced out stuffed chuckles at best. Besides, anyone All Might trusts I think I could trust. Nodding to the hero, he turned to Netsu and just spoke. I'll talk to you later about that contract I'd like your help creating. With his bit of fun had, he turned and walked off towards the bus so he could get back to the main campus and head home. He had preparations for a reunion to make after all. The moment the green-haired boy left, Naomasa turned to his friend and started to berate him. You let a kid we don't fully know if we can trust find out your secret? He stage whispered it as he didn't want to cause a scene, but his friend shrank in on himself nonetheless. It wasn't my fault, he found out after my time limit had been used up for the day. It was a complete accident. The most powerful hero in the world, and he cowered under the gaze of his friend. Though I will admit, he started knowing this would cause trouble later. He seems trustworthy, but his story held a few lies. He lied about his family. I don't know the extent, but he lied every time he said something about his family. The only truth about them was that we shouldn't worry about them. Looks of both fear and relief filled the faces of both the heroes before him. Good decided on telling them what his quirk did about his last comment. The thing I find interesting was the lie he told at the end. Both heroes were looking at him with a critical eye now. He phrased the last thing before mentioning that contract like a statement. Both men were looking at him, Netsu having a look of fear develop on his face while Toshinori looked clueless. He lied about someone having the ability to take quirks not existing. He looked as his friend's face morphed and he looked at the back of one of his students as he reached the bus and climbed on. Naomasa said the thing all of them didn't want to think about. I think he might already know about all for one. Some way somehow he found out about the most deadly villain in history. He's in danger no matter what we do.